Hey friends, it's Tomer, and I've brewed 45 brand new Commander decks, each under $45. Before we check out the deck list though, I'm going to have a quick disclaimer popping up on the screen right now to address the most common questions about these compilation videos. I'm using MTG Goldfish as the price standard for all these decks. They were $45 or under at the time of recording, but they're probably going to go up over time. The deck prices don't account for shipping because that can vary wildly from $0 if you're just picking it up at your local game store to a lot of money if you're ordering it from far away. So with the disclaimers out of the way, let's look at the deck lists. We're going alphabetically, and the first one on the list is Ardbert, Warrior of Darkness. This is basically Orzhov, Black-White Matters, and also Legendary Creatures Matters mushed together. So Ardbert says whenever you cast a white spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on each legendary creature you control. They gain vigilance until end of turn. And whenever you cast a black spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on each legendary creature you control. They gain menace until end of turn. So the idea is to just have a bunch of legendary creatures, cast a bunch of spells that are both white and black to maximize the number of counters we're putting on everything and the keywords that we're putting on them, and then this smash face with some really souped up legendary creatures. So the first thing we're doing is obviously filling the board with legendary creatures, ideally ones that are both black and white. Abigail is fantastic, comes down on 2. Her ETB essentially nerfs an opponent's really powerful creature if they have a really powerful ability, like a commander, for example. You just remove all those abilities and give them some keyword counters in exchange. It's devastating targeting your opponent's commanders with it. And then she has Flying, First Strike, and Lifelink. So when Ardbert is pumping her up, you just gain more and more life, and she's just a really powerful beater. Jarina, Dauntless General, has that utility of just being able to remove people's graveyards. That's always great. And also, there's a lot of humans in the deck, including our commander is also a human. So you can sacrifice it and save a bunch of your creatures in response to a board wipe or some removal or whatever. And then Carmen specifically works really well with pumping her up with Ardbert's ability, because every single time she's attacking, you can return a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to Carmen's power. So the higher her power, the bigger things you can return with her ability. We're running a ton of legendary creatures in this deck, so we're going to be supporting it with a bunch of really powerful Legends Matters support pieces, like the Chemist Royal Funeral draws us a ton of cards and adds some mana discount to our legendary spells, which is fantastic. We Ride at Dawn gives all our legendary creatures Convoke on top of pooping out some extra mercenary tokens, which is fantastic. Primeval's Glorious Rebirth just returns all legendary permanent cards from the graveyard to the battlefield, just a great top end. There's other cards that also support legendaries, but these are 3 of the most notable ones. And then we also are putting +1/+1 counters on all our creatures with Ardbert, so we have a bit of a counters matter sub-theme going on too. Damning Verdict is one of the most expensive cards that we're splurging for. It's essentially a one-sided board wipe because we're going to have counters on our creatures. Our opponents probably won't, so all their creatures dies and ours stick around. The Duke is wonderful here because it's a legendary creature, and when you're putting counters on him with Ardbert, you can remove those counters and protect your creatures. And then Chocobo Knights just gives all your huge, beefy creatures with counters on them double strike whenever you're attacking. It's really, really good. So that's the list. I would say this is a solid bracket 2 deck. It's not doing anything fancy, but there's just a lot of baked in utility because you don't really care about having like really big, scary creatures. Ardbert is the finisher, and it's in the command zone, and it's a very efficient way of just putting counters on everything. So it's really easy to build off that various ways. It doesn't look too scary, but like when you actually see it in playing, it can get out of control very, very quickly. That said, it's not doing anything like particularly broken or anything. The commander isn't broken or anything. So I think it's like a very solid bracket 2 deck. Next up is one of my current favorite budget brews. It is Ashling Rekindled, which is basically high mana value spells deck. Big haymakers in Izzet. It's absolutely wonderful. And I actually got the inspiration for this deck over on Reddit. I think it was a thread by Redditor Hey Mister, I believe. It's going to be on the screen right now with editing. But yeah, they basically showed how to build Ashling as just basically like the curve just starts at mana value 4, and you just play some mana rocks and then go from there with big haymakers. And it's super, super fun. And I built a budget version of it because it looked like such a cool concept. And it turned out to be quite powerful. I would say this one is like bracket 3. Can be played at bracket 2 as well, but it definitely punches much higher than you would expect it to. So Ashling is a cool double-faced commander from Lorwyn Eclipse. There was a whole cycle of them, and they're all really neat. The front side, it ETBs, and you can rummage. And then the next turn, the following turn, you can flip her. And when you flip her, you start generating 2 mana every single turn. The turn you flip her, and then every subsequent turn that she's on the backside, you generate 2 mana, and that mana can only be spent on spells mana 4 or greater. And then you can flip her back and keep rummaging away if you don't have anything else to do. Or you could just keep her on the blue side and continue making 2 mana per turn, which is redonkulous on a 2-drop. So the game plan here is very simple. Every single game, you're going to go turn 2 Ashling, turn 3, you flip her, generate 2 extra mana, so you're up 1 mana in the result, and you can cast a 4-drop on turn 3, and then, ideally, you could do even crazier things on turn 4. So you flip Ashling on turn 3, and what are you trying to cast? You're trying to cast a mana rock, and this is the first time in many, many years where I would recommend running Hedron Archive, and not only is it okay, it's actually one of the best cards in the deck. No joke. It's not a Thrain Dynamo level, but it's still very good. You play any of these 4-drop mana rocks on turn 3 with Ashling, and they're tapping for 2 mana. In the case of Thrain Dynamo, 3 mana, and that sets you up for a turn 4 where you can actually cast an 8-drop on turn 4. If you go turn 2 Ashling, turn 3 flip her over into a Hedron Archive, turn 4 you play another land. You have 4 lands. You have 2 mana from the Ashling, 2 mana from the Hedron Archive. You can drop an 8-drop. It's also a Spellslinger deck focused on instants and sorceries because, at least on a budget, those are the most powerful spells you have access to that are still cheap. So cards like Wizards of Fae, while not an actual mana rock like Hedron Archive, work just as well, if not better in some cases, giving a mana discount to your instants and sorceries. So once you have your mana dork on turn 3, turn 4, you start going crazy. The type of spells you're going to be casting, things like One with the Multiverse you can cast on turn 4, which is absolutely ridiculous. A semi-omniscient / future sight effect. Or you can just start jamming down these ridiculous spells like Blatant Thievery, start stealing everybody's best cards on turn 4. And Soulfire Eruption, not always turn 4, but like turn 5, you just start blowing up everything and generating a huge amount of card advantage in the process. It's super, super fun. And then for finishers, we have a bunch of cards that are keyed off of casting big non-creature spells. Tela, for example, every single time you're casting a non-creature spell, which is what the deck is primarily composed of, you're going to make a 1/1, but if you spend 4 or more, you get to draw 2 cards, and then if you spend a ton of mana, you get to sacrifice Tela and just nug everybody in the face when you want to start killing people. Ovika, same thing. You just poop out huge spells, and when you're pooping out huge spells, you make a whole bunch of goblins that have haste and can immediately attack. Super, super fun. And like I said, this is a Spellslinger deck, so you're going to have just like a bunch of huge spells in the graveyard, and then the late game Mystics Mastery is definitely going to seal the deal. Super, super fun. The deck list, as I said, is quite powerful. I would say it is best suited at bracket 3, though you could probably still play it at bracket 2 as well. It's just very consistent. It's just always going to have that turn 2 Ashling, turn 3, you're going to have access to a ton of mana. You drop a 4-drop, and it's kind of hard for your opponents to disrupt it too much. I think the main way you stop it is just like you kill Ashling and you kill the mana rocks. You do like a board wipe on turn 4 or something. That will set the deck really far back, but like it's usually too fast for like bracket 2s to really answer it fast enough before you start Blatant Thievering and all this stuff. At bracket 3, though, it's more likely that it will get shut down reasonably. That's why I think it's better suited for bracket 3. The next stun we got is Azula, Cunning, Usurper. This is by far the lesser popular Azula. The Grixis one gets all the glory, but this Azula is actually incredibly powerful too. It has Firebending too, and when it enters, target opponent exiles a non-token creature they control, then they exile a non-land card from their graveyard, and on your turn, you can cast cards exiled with Azula, and you cast them with Flash. So you can attack with Azula and use that Firebending mana to help cast those spells. Mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. So this card is basically a Dimir blink control. You're just constantly blinking Azula to constantly remove your opponent's creatures and also removing stuff from their graveyard, and it just generates both removal and card advantage rolled into one, and it's even mana advantage because Azula helps cast those spells with Firebending too. It's really, really good. A really, really good engine. I feel like this is also maybe a bracket 3 deck just because it is obnoxiously powerful if your opponents care about their creatures, which is most decks. But it is also playable at bracket 2 because it's not like super fast or anything. So the first step we want to be doing is we want to be just blinking. We want to be blinking Azula. We want to get rid of all our opponent's creatures and generate card advantage each time we're doing so because we can cast them. So like Essence Flux, 1 mana blink. Baral's expertise, you can bounce a bunch of stuff, including Azula, back to your hand and back to your opponent's hands, and then cast something for 4 or less immediately afterwards. Golden Argosy, if you crew it, you can blink whatever crewed it. It's quite nice. And then we obviously have a bunch of other blinkable creatures in the 99 as well. It's not just our commander. Solemn Simulacrum, just a solid creature, but if you start blinking it starts ramping you more. Hama the Bloodbender is wonderful. It mills for you too, so it gives more options for our commander to yoink. And it also yoinks by itself too. And then we have a little bit of like blink support cards like Starfield Vocalist, where you're just doubling the blinky value, which is quite nice. And yeah, the list is pretty straightforward. It's just Dimir Blink, but the commander is just really, really powerful, repeatable removal and card advantage. It can be pretty oppressive. That's why I feel like it's better suited in bracket 3. The main downside is it's a bit slow. You know, like if you're a bunch up against decks that have a really fast start, like a Soul Ring start or wherever, they might be able to generate a board state that is too big for Azula's slower, blinky value engine to really catch up to. But, you know, at bracket 2, it'd probably be a little bit too oppressive. So I would say more often this is bracket 3, but it's also playable at bracket 2. Next, we got Belbe, Corrupted Observer. And this one was basically, I built the Ashling deck because I went from 40 decks under $40 to 45 under $45 because I just didn't want to deal with price spikes anymore. And I built Ashling and I'm like, yeah, this idea of having like a 2-drop commander that will consistently ramp you on turn 3 is a pretty strong strategy. Let's see what else can do similar things. And lo and behold, I remembered Belbe exists. Belbe is a 2-drop commander, and it says at the beginning of each player's post-combat main phase, that player adds 2 colorless mana for each of your opponents who lost life this turn. So it's kind of group huggy in that your opponents can also generate colorless mana off Belbe as long as they're damaging your opponents. But you're always going to generate more value because you have 3 opponents and your opponents only have 2, and you're also going to be built around generating this mana. So the idea with Belbe is basically play Belbe, turn 3, make sure that everybody's taking at least 1 damage or losing at least 1 life, and then you generate 6 mana with Belbe on turn 3, which is absolutely wild. It takes a little bit more to set up than Ashling, but then the payoff is even higher. So the things you're going to be doing to consistently get Belbe trigger on turn 3 is like 1-drop drain effects like Night Market Lookout and Mardu's Shadow Spear. We don't even care if these cards live after they attack. We just want to trigger them 1 time to generate 6 mana with Belbe's ability. Then at a higher mana value, like 2 or more, we have stuff like Shepherd of Rot, where they're slower, they cost more mana, but they don't need to attack. They're not going to die as easily. And like Shepherd of Rot, you know, just taps it. Everybody loses 1 life. Doesn't need to attack. It doesn't need to die. And it's just 6 mana with Belbe. It's absolutely ridiculous. So now, once we're triggering 6 mana with Belbe, we're doing just big Haymaker stuff similar to Ashling. You could get a turn 3 God Pharaoh's statue on the battlefield, which will make your opponents groan quite heavily. That's quite powerful. All their spells are taxed by 2. Wondrous Crucible is at 7 mana, but then all your permanents have Ward 2, and it's generating card advantage and mana advantage every single end step, which is fantastic. And of course, you can drop down big ol' Eldrazi's, like Breaker of Creation. Annihilator 2 gains you a bunch of life, kind of hard to kill. This is not an Eldrazi deck. The more expensive versions of this deck do usually go Eldrazi, but at a lower budget, it's less feasible to do so. Instead, I was going for just like big card draw spells, big rampy spells, like Shriekwood Devourer just can basically untap all your lands. It rewards you for having high power creatures. Spry and Mighty is a new one. If you have like Shriekwood Devourer on the battlefield and Belbe, you can cast Spry and Mighty. You'll draw 5 cards, and both creatures are going to get +5/+5 in trample, which is quite fun. Tooth and Nail is another one it's used to be a powerhouse back in the day. It used to be a really scary card. I think it's still a scary card, but Belbe is really, really easy to take advantage of it. Just like 2-drop 2 creatures immediately slam them onto the battlefield. That's super fun. So yeah, the deck very similar to Ashling, where you have a 2-drop ramp. Turn 3, you ramp a whole bunch of mana, and you just start slamming down haymakers. The mana curve is ridiculous. I feel like this is another one that should be bracket 3, though you could probably play at bracket 2 if people just believe in like Source of Plowshares and stuff, because this one is a little bit easier to disrupt than Ashling. You need to have a drain creature or a drain effect. You need to have Belbe on the battlefield to get rolling. But once you do have other ramp sources and stuff on the battlefield, you don't need Belbe as much. You just kind of need to have her on like turn 3 or 4. But if people like immediately swords her or something, you can really set the deck back. But yeah, I think this is more suited to bracket 3 than bracket 2, but you could probably still play a bracket 2, no problem. Then we've got actually a request. This was from Trinket Mage. Trinket Mage, amazing YouTuber. Love his video essays on Commander, and he loves Ben Akki Hermit, and he requested that I do a budget brew on Ben, so I'm doing it. Now, this is actually a kind of difficult one, because Ben unfortunately does suck, but he is an old Kamigawa legendary, and I have a soft spot for old Kamigawa legendaries, so I did my best to make it work. So this is a 4-mana 1/1, great start, that says you could tap it, it deals damage to target attacking creature equal to the number of untapped mountains you control, which is pretty bad. That means you don't really want to tap out with your mountains in order to hold up Ben ability, and Ben can only kill things if they're attacking. So as long as they're not attacking, then Ben doesn't really do anything anyway. So you either have to like goad your opponent's creatures into attacking, maybe give Ben like Death Touch or something like that. All of that is a lot of work for very little gain, unfortunately. However, I went with a build that I think is pretty legit. So one cute thing we can do with Ben is we can actually just target our own creatures. So if we're like attacking with a Brash Taunter or an Ill-Tempered Loner, we can redirect that damage to something else, an opponent's face, an opponent's creatures, whatever. And they work really, really well with Red's mass burn spells, like Blasphemous Act. So if we have like Brash Taunter, Ill-Tempered Loner, we just start Blasphemous Acting and dealing a bunch of damage to our opponent's faces that way and win the game that way. That's super fun. The other way that we're going to really take advantage of Ben is just not tapping out on our turn. We're going to play Draw Go. So we're filled with instants that basically draw cards or ramp us or both. So it's things like Big Score and Thrill of Possibility. These are card neutral. They're just looting effects. However, when we start copying them with spells like Tempt with Mayhem and our other fork effects, we start turning those card neutral spells into card advantage, because when we copy a Thrill of Possibility, for example, we don't have to pay the additional cost of discarding a card. So if we cast Thrill of Possibility and we cast Tempt with Mayhem or whatever fork spell, we're going to be drawing 2 cards each copy, and we don't have to discard a card, so it's just like straight up card draw. Same thing with Big Score, and we even go up in mana because we're generating treasures off it. So that's kind of the idea behind this deck. You play Drago control with a bunch of like silly instants and copying them for extra value. My favorite win condition of the deck is also one of my favorite pet cards. It's Prisoner's Dilemma. It's just a silly burn spell that just gets the entire table involved, and it's very funny to see everybody fighting amongst themselves and oftentimes choosing the wrong votes and, sealing everybody's fates in the process. It's really, really funny, and you can just copy it a bunch of times, right? You just copy it with like increasing vengeance and pyromancer's goggles and just keep everybody in a deadly saw game and just watch them all kill each other. It's really, really funny. So yeah, this is like a solid bracket 2 deck. It's definitely not bracket 3. Ben sucks. He's not a very good commander. He's funny though. He's very funny, and he does actually do some cool work in this deck, but he's by far not going to be carrying anything. It's a 4-mana mono red commander that has no built-in protection or anything. Don't expect him to be on the battlefield very long, but by golly, he tries, and isn't he silly when he does it? It's cool, though. Next, we've got Black Cat, which is essentially Gonti for 2025. It's a mono-black theft deck that is all about blinking Black Cat, returning her to the battlefield various ways, bouncing her, reanimating her, and just stealing your opponent's cards and using that to win the game. It's very, very silly. Black Cat, 5 mana. When it ETBs, you look at the top 9 cards of target opponent's library, you exile 2 of them face down, and then put the rest at the bottom of the library in random order, and you can play the exiled cards for as long as they remain exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast spells this way. So it's just a repeatable card advantage engine, theft engine on an ETB on Black Cat. And as long as you're blinking and bouncing and reanimating it, you keep just stealing away, and it's super, super fun. And the better your opponent's haymakers are, the more powerful this deck gets. I feel like it actually scales quite well between brackets 2 and 3 because of that. Like, the better your opponent's decks are, just the better this deck gets in comparison. So yeah, either bracket 2 or bracket 3, I think it'll be absolutely fine. So the ways we're going to be reusing Black Cat's really powerful ETB, Blade of Selves is a great one. In Myriad's Black Cat, you don't keep the tokens when they enter the battlefield because of the legend rule, but if you attack with Black Cat, equipped with the Blade of Selves, you make a copy for your other 2 opponents, so you get 2 more triggers each time you're attacking, which is quite nice. Conjurer's Closet is just a good old blink effect on Black Cat on your end step. And Skull Collector is a cute one for black decks where you could return balanced Black Cat back to your hands. And also the Skull Collector has regenerate, so it's a little bit harder for your opponents to remove it. And then you can just keep recasting Black Cat. The other thing that we've got here is obviously some theft support because this is a theft deck. There's not too many options available, especially on a budget, and a lot of them aren't even very good. But my favorite ones that I added in here, Thieving Amalgam, it's a lot of mana. It's 7 mana. It's quite expensive. However, it's really cute because it steals by itself for each opponent on their upkeeps. And whenever your creatures are dying that you stole, if you go to Thieving Amalgam or Black Cat or whatever, your opponents lose a bunch of life and you gain a bunch of life in the process. Gonti is probably the best one, though, because whenever you're casting spells stolen with Black Cat or your other theft abilities, you're generating a bunch of treasures in the process, which I think is quite nice. And it not only helps theft for you, but it also encourages your opponents to hit each other instead of you, so they get the Gonti trigger, which is quite nice. And Staff of Eden is another really, really powerful one. It ETBs, it can steal a legendary permanent card from somebody's graveyard, and then also taps, and each time it taps, you draw cards equals the number of permanents you control but don't own. So if you're stealing with Black Cat and stealing with other things, you can draw a whole bunch of cards every single turn with Staff of Eden. And then the other thing that I really like in this deck is my pet favorite win condition in black heavy decks, which is Doomsday Excruciator. It works so well with Black Cat. So Doomsday Excruciator, if you cast it and ETBs, everybody exiles all but the bottom 6 cards of their library, so the game's going to end quite fast. And remember, Black Cat and these other theft spells are removing cards from your opponent's libraries. So Doomsday Excruciator, a couple Black Cat triggers, they're going to have no library left to draw from. We also have Malboro as just like a big swamp cycler that, gets a land early, late game though. If you have Doomsday Excruciator on the battlefield, you exile the top 3 cards of your opponent's decks. Now they only have 3 cards remaining. Oblivion Sower is also hilarious because you've exiled so many cards with the Doomsday Excruciator. You get all those lands that got exiled, but then also you exile 4 cards off somebody. So they're only going to have 2 cards remaining. So you're not going to have those lands for long because they're going to die soon, but it's very, very funny. But yeah, so that's the list. It's like a mix of theft and blink and a little bit of aristocrats and control. But yeah, it's quite fun, and it definitely scales up to the rest of the table. So if everybody's playing bracket 2, it's going to be totally fine. If everybody's playing bracket 3, this deck is a little bit slow, but it's going to scale up to bracket 3 because you're going to steal just better quality spells from your opponents. So I feel like bracket 2, bracket 3, it's fun in both of those. The next one we have is definitely one that has absolutely no chill whatsoever. It's literally a guy's cradle in the command zone for Selesnya, which is bananas. It's Brigid, Clachan's Heart. So the front side, when it ETBs or transforms into Brigid, you make a 1/1 Kithkin token. And then on the beginning of your next turn, main phase next turn, you can pay 1 green, you flip it over, and boom, it now taps for either green or white, where X is the number of creatures you control, and then you can flip it back and forth. So basically, turn 2 or 3 Brigid, you wait a turn, you flip her over, and boom, you got a Greatest Cradle. I'm sure nothing degenerate happens when you have that, right? Wrong. So this deck is basically oops, all combos. The commander's not chill, so I figured might as well go completely unchill with this. This is definitely a bracket 3 deck, by the way. We have some infinite mana combos. Sea Cradle Rich being the absolute best one of these. Like, if you have 5+ creatures on the battlefield and some extra mana laying around, you can tap Brigid for either like 5+ green or 5+ white, untap her with Sea Cradle Witch, and then tap her for the opposite color the next time. Go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you'll make infinite mana. But not just infinite mana, you can also like infinite untap all your creatures and make them infinitely large. So it's very, very easy to turn that into a winning condition. Gauntlets of Light is much worse. It could only untap Brigid, and you can only generate infinite mana, and I guess you increase the toughness by a little bit, but it's not like infinite power or anything, but it's still infinite mana very easily. As long as you have 4 or more creatures on the battlefield, that's infinite mana with the backside of Brigid and Gauntlet of Light. And then Village Bellringer isn't a combo by itself, but it can untap all your creatures, including Brigid, so you can get a huge mana swing on a single turn. And there are ways of actually comboing with it. Teamer Sabertooth is another way of generating infinite mana with Brigid. You just like tap Brigid for a bunch of mana, Village Bellringer, untap all your creatures, bounce the Bellringer back to hand with the Teamer Sabertooth, recast it, make infinite mana that way. Once you have infinite mana, you can draw all the creatures from your entire deck with Duskwatch Recruiter. You can pump all your creatures infinite times and give them vigilance with Silk Web Weaver. And you can also make infinite +1/+1 counters on each of your creatures with Shalai. And all of these have extra utilities on top of being infinite mana sinks in the deck. They're just very flexible. So that's a list. It has no chill whatsoever. It's one of the strongest budget brews in this video. So if you're asking what's one of the strongest ones, this is going to be Brigid. It's definitely a bracket 3. That said, it is definitely not unbeatable. Most of the combos that go infinite don't win the game on a single turn unless you have creatures that can attack. So like if you have already a couple creatures that like don't have summoning sickness, you can make them infinitely large, and you can also give them trample and whatnot, and that's going to win you the game. But like if you can make infinite mana but you don't have creatures to attack with, you generally speaking this deck can't actually win off that, because you need to still find haste enablers and stuff like that too, to actually finish it. And also, obviously, the deck requires having a bunch of creatures on the battlefield. And this deck runs a bunch of ways of giving your creatures protection, obviously. Mass Indestructible, Mass Hexproof, and whatnot. But still, if your opponents all just conspire together to get rid of Brigid and shut her down, she will be shut down most often. So I'd say it's a solid bracket 3, but it's definitely not like a bracket 4 or something like that. It's definitely beatable. And the combos, due to budget restrictions, are not going to be as insane as they could be. For example, like we just can't afford a Walking Ballista in our list. If we afforded a Walking Ballista here, we wouldn't need to attack and have creatures that don't have summoning sickness. We could just kill people with infinite damage without going to combat. Next up, we have Captain Howler Sea Scourge. This is a Discard Matters deck that also has a pirate sub-theme. So Captain Howler says whenever you discard one or more cards, target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. For each card discarded this way, whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player this turn, you draw a card. So Captain Howler is pumping not just our creatures, but we can pump up our opponent's creatures when they're going to attack, people who are hopefully not us. So they get to deal damage and we get to draw cards off their own attackers. So he's pretty flexible in that regard. He can help boost our creatures and draw cards that way, or help boost our opponent's creatures and draw cards that way too. And it's just about discarding and having fun stuff off that. So our main discard outlets are almost always going to be instants because that gives us permanent flexibility. We can either use that to pump up our creatures, or we could save it for our opponent's turns and pump up their creatures instead. And it also allows us to hold up interaction and stuff easier. So like Demand Answers, just like a good old looter, but like Broadside Barrage, it costs a little bit more mana, but it also comes with removal. And then Magma Opus, we just discard it early to make a treasure token, but we also trigger the captain at the same time. And later on in the game, we could just hard cast it to get more value that way. Then we have a bunch of cards that care about discarding. So Ivora, for example, grows when we discard cards. Mary Reed and Anne Bonny, if we're discarding an island, pirate, or vehicle, we make treasure tokens. And then we have like just some weirdo cards that make me very nostalgic, like Circular Logic. It's a counterspell that has madness, so when we discard it, we can counter something and just for 1 blue mana and feel really, really cool. I love this card. And then, like I said, we have a pirate sub-theme. A lot of the pirates just kind of work with what the Captain Howler is doing, so we might as well throw him in there. Marauding Mako cares about Discard Matters, and he's a big pirate, and he can even be cycle, so he can even trigger our commander when we need it. Malcolm is just a really good mana generator in a deck that happens to have a lot of pirates, and same thing with Coercive Recruiter, just a really good threaten engine if we're in a pirate deck, which this is. So yeah, these are really cool cards to kind of fill out the deck. So yeah, the list is quite fun. I think this is probably a solid bracket 2 list. It can be really explosive at times, but I think it's a pretty fair deck at the same time. It's not doing like any ridiculous combos and winning super, super fast or anything. It's a good, solid pirate deck that can have some really scary turns, hit people for a lot of damage, but it's not going to like destroy precon level decks or whatever. All right, the next one is going to be birds. This is Choco, Seeker of Paradise. This is a Bant bird deck that kind of puts together birds and a little bit of landfall and mixes them together into something delicious. So whenever one or more birds you control attack, look at that many cards from the top of your library. You may put one of them into your hand, then put any number of land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped and the rest into your graveyard. And whenever a land you control enters, Choco gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So this is insane ramp if you have a ton of birds on the battlefield that you're attacking with, because you can put a whole bunch of lands on the battlefield. And, you're always going to draw one card off it too. So it's card draw and then insane ramp on top of things. And then, Choco gets really, really big, but it doesn't have evasion. So that's like the primary purpose here. So the main idea is the first couple turns, we're just playing some cheapo birds. Judge's Familiar, absolutely fantastic. It's a little bit of a tempo play because it can mess up our opponent's turns. Isior comes out turn 2, and it will make sure that Choco is more likely to stick around, thanks to giving it kind of like a Ward 3 ability, and it's a bird, and it can swing in with evasion. And we have some other bird support cards like Jackdaw Savior. It's also triggering Choco very easily because that has evasion, but it also provides a little bit of graveyard recursion in the process. And then we have a whole bunch of like support pieces. So this is a bird deck, and most birds fly. So Winged Portent works quite well here. I know Choco doesn't fly and Chocobos don't fly, so some of the birds don't fly, and I am still a little bit bitter about that, but whatever. Airborne Aid works for all birds, so even Choco included. Doesn't matter if they fly or not, it doesn't discriminate. And then we're also a little bit of a landfall deck too, because Choco's ability just generates so many lands into the battlefield at the same time. So we do have cards like Feldar's Retreat, which can pump up all our birds and give them vigilance, or we could just just poop out a bunch of 2/2s, whichever works is both really good. So yeah, the list is quite consistent, quite fun. I would say it's a bracket 2, maybe a bracket 3 deck. It's, I guess, the most vulnerable against board wipes because you do want to have like 3 or 4 birds on the battlefield and then swing in with them and then have Choco on the battlefield. So if your opponent's like board wipe before you can get down Choco and start, generating some value, it can feel pretty bad. But honestly, like Choco is just a 4-drop. You could probably get it out turn 3 and swing with a bird on the same turn, and you'll be fine and you'll be happy. And then a board wipe can happen and it's totally fine. But yeah, I think it's still fine as like a bracket 2 deck, possibly bracket 3. Okay, the next one we have is Mono Blue Voltron. It's a weird one though. This is Curie Emergent Intelligence. It's basically Artifact Voltron, but weird. So whenever Curie deals combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its base power. Its base power is 1 by itself. However, you can pay 2 mana, exile another non-token artifact creature you control, and Curie becomes a copy of the exiled creature, except it has, whenever this creature does combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its base power. So if you copy something that has a higher base power, you can possibly draw more cards off this ability. So we're going to be copying big artifact creatures. One of the best, coolest tech is fairly recent. It's Bygone Colossus. We can warp it in for 3 mana, and it's a 9/9 creature. So the idea is you warp it in for 3, you pay 2 additional mana to exile it with Curie, and now Curie is just a 9/9 and can draw 9 cards each swing. Cannoneer is another great one because it comes with Ward 4 as well, and it grows super, super big. And it's already a base power 4/4. Darksteel Juggernaut is another great one that its base power is huge, and it also is indestructible. Having to attack each turn is not a downside because that's what we're intending to do anyway. And then to make sure that we're drawing cards consistently, we have a bunch of support pieces like Aqueous Form, just gives Curie unblockable, a little bit of scrying action too. It's an artifact deck as well, so we're going really hard on artifacts, so artifact discounts like Foundry Inspector is also good. Worst case, we could just eat it with Curie, and now we can swing in for 3. And then Water Wings, we have a lot of protection spells for Curie because this is a Voltron deck, so this gives it a hexproof, but it also increases its base power and toughness until end of turn, and gives it evasion. So worst case, if we don't need the protection, we could just use this to give Curie evasion and draw 4 cards at the same time, which is quite nice. So the list is very straightforward. I see that it's $46 right now, and I checked the price literally yesterday before I was recording to make sure it was under 45. Very frustrating. You can see the price spike is happening. I don't know. You're just gonna have to deal with it. I'm gonna have to deal with it. I'm not gonna redo this video again. Oh my god. Can you imagine? No, I'm not going to. You're just gonna have to. We're both gonna have to just deal with the fact that price spikes and price creep is gonna happen. I'm so sorry. It's $46 according to MTG Goldfish. I'm sorry. Let's just move on before I get upset. All right. We got Doran, Besieged by Time. This is an Abzan commander that just came out in Lorwyn Eclipse, and it cares about high toughness matters, specifically just having more toughness than power. It gives mana discount. Each creature you cast with toughness greater than its power costs 1 less to cast. And it also says whenever a creature you control attacks or blocks, it gets +X until end of turn, where X is the difference between its power and toughness. So it gives a huge pump effect to your big booty creatures. So when Doran's attacking, for example, it gets +5/5, which is quite nice, or when it blocks. So mana discount and Anthem rolled into one, that's a lot of value for a 4-drop. And so the direction that I went for it was basically just big booties. I initially wanted to go like Tree Folk, like focus specifically on Tree Folk, but like all the Tree Folk support cards are very, very expensive because they didn't get reprinted in Lorwyn Eclipse, so they're all super, super pricey. So I just stuck with high toughness, but you could definitely use this as a basis to go full Tree Folk if you want to. I wouldn't even say that's like a more optimized path. It's just, I just like Tree Folk. But we do have a couple Tree Folk. Great Forest Druid. It's just a 2-drop mana dork that has 4 toughness, so you can cast it for 1 if Doran's already on the battlefield, and it could swing in for 4 or block for 4 power as a 4/8. Sinister Gnarlbark is just fantastic. It's a really great Phyrexian arena because it draws on end step. And the Blight one, who cares? Who cares about the Blight one? You can Blight one forever in this deck. And Chomping Changeling, yeah, it's not technically, it's not actually a Tree Folk, I know, but it is a Changeling, and you can cast it for just 2 mana with Doran out, and it can swing in as a 2/3, which is cute. I like him. Then the nice thing about High Toughness Matters is that there is so much overpowered support for this archetype, I swear to you. And a lot of them is super cheap, like very, very, very cheap to include. As long as you're not focusing on Tree Folk in particular, if you're just focusing on high toughness, low power, there's a lot of overpowered things to swing in to your list. Fecund Greenshell pumps up your team for 1, but also whenever you're entering, whenever your high toughness creatures are entering, you just ramp a whole bunch, which is good. Or worst case, you just put cards into your hand. So it's either draw or just crazy ramp. Solid is strong, 3 mana. It's not quite a full one-sided board wipe, but basically none of your creatures are going to be dying, or very few of your creatures are going to be dying, and most of your opponent's creatures are going to be dying in the process for 3 mana. That's ridiculous. And then Reunion of the House, it's 7 mana. It's a lot of mana, but it's just like a mass reanimate of all the creatures in your graveyard directly onto the battlefield. Very much worth it for 7 mana. And then to win the game, we have just a lot of really cool options, actually. Jaws of Defeat just drains out your opponents with your high toughness, low power creatures. Felithar allows our creatures to deal damage with their toughness instead of their power. Big booty, that's important. And it even lets our defenders attack as though they don't have a defender. And they can also be converted into card draw if we need to. And Bedrock Tortoise does the same thing as Felithar. It lets your high toughness creatures deal damage with their toughness instead of power. But it also gives a little bit of hexproof when it's on your turn, which is nice too. So yeah, that's the list. I feel like it's a quite good, powerful deck, honestly. Like, going Tree Folk, I like Tree Folk a lot, but it's a little bit out of the budget range. And I honestly think it would make the deck a little bit weaker. To be honest, this actually just works better if you're just focusing on toughness in general. But yeah, I think there's just like a really, really powerful support cards in Toughness Matters, and it makes the deck really, really strong. Just the removal options and the recursion options are really, really good here. And our commander providing mana advantage and also a huge anthem just sweetens the deal very much. So I feel like this is like a high bracket 2 / a bracket 3 deck, just because it doesn't look like much, but it plays very well. Next, we've got Eluge the Shoreless Sea, which is another blue, kind of Voltron-y commander, kind of Spellslinger-y commander. It's kind of Voltron Spellslinger mono blue. Eluge, its power and toughness is each equal to the number of islands you control, which is going to be 5 or more quite easily in a mono blue deck. When it enters or attacks, you put a flood counter on target land and becomes an island in addition to its other types, as long as it has a flood counter on it. And the first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn costs 1 blue or 1 generic less to cast for each land you control with a flood counter on it. So Eluge basically wants to be being blinked and attacking every single turn to put a bunch of flood counters on everything. That'll give a huge discount on all your instants and sorcery spells, and eventually just all your instants and sorceries are going to be basically free to cast. And that's going to be wonderful while Eluge is just smacking people for a lot of damage. That's kind of the game plan with Eluge. So at the beginning, you play Eluge, you got 1 flood counter on the battlefield, and suddenly all your 1-drop instants and sorceries are free to cast. So the things we're going to be doing with that, Essence Flux blinks Eluge, immediately gets us another flood counter, so we can now cast 2 drops, instant sorcery 2 drops for free. Enigma, Enter the Enigma, gives Eluge unblockable. It doesn't have any built-in evasion, so this is a way for Eluge to attack freely, and it cantrips, so that's quite nice. Consider, we cast on an opponent's turn, and we cast it for free always, and we get to do a little bit of card selection. We cantrip, that's quite nice. And then once we have enough flood counters on everything, Eluge has been doing its thing. We have like 4+ flood counters on the battlefield. We start casting the big haymaker. So Rite of Replication for 4 mana, a clone, that's absolutely fine. When you kick it though, that's a game winner right there. Having 5 copies of something entering the battlefield is pretty significant. Blatant Thievery, a classic. Stealing everybody's best thing is a great way to win the game. And then we have like stuff like Instants like Flow of Knowledge, which we can easily cast for 0 mana with Eluge on an opponent's turn and just refill our entire hand. That's super fun. So yeah, that's the list. It's very straightforward. It's just mono blue Voltron Spellslinger. Hit people with really, really big Eluge, blink Eluge for more flood tokens, and then cast Haymaker spells, and your opponents will fall over. This one is a bit oppressive. I played it a few times already, and the deck is quite strong. The problem is that it's kind of hard to shut down unless your opponents all work together / you play poorly and you tap out, or you just don't have protection in your hand. Because the deck is blue. We're blue, and we're draw go-y, and we can afford to run a lot of counter magic and blink spells and whatnot to protect Eluge. And as long as Eluge is allowed to stick around, every single time you add more flood counters to the board, your big Haymaker spells become cheaper and cheaper to cast. And then once you're starting to cast, like, Blatant Thievery, Dig 3 time for 0 mana, your opponents are going to have a really bad time trying to stop you. And you're smacking people for like 8+ damage with your commander, which is hilarious. So yeah, this deck is quite scary once it gets going. I would say bracket 3 for this one. Next up, we have everyone's favorite new commander, probably responsible for most of the price spikes that have been vexing me for the past couple of months. It's Firelord Azula. This is a Grixis commander that is incredibly focused on instants and flash and attacking and doubling all those spells for tons of value. So it has Firebending 2. And whenever you cast a spell while Firelord Azula is attacking, you copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is not once per turn. This is not once per combat or anything. It's just you go into combat. You get to just copy every single spell you're casting once you're in combat with Azula. So the idea of Azula is to attack and essentially storm off while Azula is attacking. The bread and butter of Storm for Azula are spells like Big Score. It's 4 mana instant. You discard a card when you cast it, and then you draw 2 cards and create 2 treasure tokens. By itself, not that interesting. You're basically looting. You're not up in cards, and you're refunded 2 of the 4 mana you spent. But when you have Azula out and you copy it, Big Score reads basically pay 4 mana, discard 1 card, draw 4 cards, and create 4 treasure tokens. You're basically mana neutral with the amount of treasure tokens you've generated. You've spent 4 mana, you gain 4 treasures, so you have a full refund there. And you spent 2 cards to go up 2 cards, basically. You spent Big Score and discarded a card to draw 4 cards. So you're up 4 cards and you're down 0 mana, and you just kind of keep going from there. A new card that's really good that fits in well with this is Ashling's Command, where you basically decide to draw 4 cards and create 4 treasures for the price of 5 mana. And sometimes you just board wipe your opponents instead. You can deal up to 4 damage to target players' creatures, and that usually kills most of them. And we can also copy Liliana's Triumphs, where suddenly now for 2 mana, all your opponents have to sacrifice 2 creatures, which is absolutely backbreaking, especially like early to mid game when not everybody has a huge army. While we're storming off and killing all our opponents' creatures, we're obviously doing spell slinger things. We're casting mostly instants. So Stormkiln Artist is going to have a field day. It's one of the best mana generators in our deck because whenever we're casting or copying a spell, like with Azula, we generate a treasure token. So every single time we're casting an instant in the attack phase with Azula, we're essentially generating 2 treasures every single time we're doing that. Invoke Calamity is also another ridiculous one. It's an instant that we can cast and copy with Azula. We can cast basically 12 mana value worth of instants and or sorceries from our graveyard when we copy it with Azula. And very notably, since we can target sorceries with it and we can cast those sorceries at instant speed when Azula is attacking, we can copy the spells that we're casting with Invoke Calamity too, including sorceries, which is ridiculous. So we cast 2 Invoke Calamities, and then everything we copy with Invoke Calamity, we then copy with Azula because we cast those spells. It's ridiculous. And for some reason, Azula players don't play this card, and it's only 50 cents. I'm so glad of it, though, because that means I can run it in my budget build, and it's not $5 or something like that. Anyway, gripe over. And also Lost in Memories is also fantastic because when Azula deals damage, we get to flash back a spell from our graveyard with Lost in Memories. But when we dealt the damage, we're still in combat, so Azula is still attacking. So if we dealt combat with Azula and then we cast a spell that we flash back with Lost Memories, we can still copy that spell. We're still in the attack phase. So that's a little thing that people don't know about the rules, or either people don't know about the rules or I'm just reading the rules wrong, and I'm going to know about that in the comment section. But I think it works the way I'm saying it is. Let me know in the comment section if I'm brilliant or I'm just dumb. Anyway, we'll move on. So the win cons. This is kind of a Voltron deck. We're kind of all in on Azula. Like, the deck can function without her. We have a lot of removal spells to at least slow down our opponents at the very least. But we really want to have Azula around in order to really pop off. So we've invested a lot of like counter spells and protection and evasion for her. So something like Fae Flight is perfect in this deck because it gives her hexproof to protect her from target removal, but also it gives her evasion and a little bit of a damage pump too on top of that. And then the ways to win, we can cast Unleash Fury to double her power twice. So if it's starting power 4, we double it to 8 and then double it to 16 when we copy it with Azula. And then even better is like Fist of Flame. It gives her trample, and the deck draws so many cards. It could give her like +5/+5 and then do it again as she has trample and somebody dies. So those are the ways we actually kill people. The deck is very strong. Definitely bracket 3. Do not bring this to bracket 2. That would be very rude. It would be very BM, I would say. This is definitely a bracket 3 deck. It's one of the strongest budget brews you can bring out. Its popularity is a testimony to that. People like powerful things. And yeah, I'm a little annoyed at Firelord Azula because she made Unexpected Windfall and other staple cards for her, like $3 now, but whatever. There was a lot of cards that I found that were very good with Azula that nobody's running, or I'm reading them wrong, so we'll see. Yeah, I think my version is pretty good, though. Yeah, okay, the next one we got is another Firelord. Not as popular as Azula, though, but he's still cool, too. Firelord Zuko is Mardu as Firebending X, where X is Firelord Zuko's power. And whenever you cast a spell from exile and whenever a permanent you control enters from exile, you put +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So Zuko is doing two things. He is exile matters, like casting from exile matters. So like impulse draw from red and white's airbending and stuff. And he rewards you for doing so by putting +1/+1 counters on all your creatures. So he's also counters matters, or like power matters. And power matters even for him because the more counters you put on him, the more his firebending will be. So there's a lot of build around potential for Firelord Zuko. I think he's actually more interesting than Azula, actually. I love Azula. She's definitely my playstyle, but Zuko actually has a lot of like interweaving synergies that are more subtle, maybe less explosive, but very, very interesting to build around. So type of things we're doing. Obviously, the main thing we need to be doing is impulse draw. That's going to be our card draw engine, and it's going to be the best way for us to be triggering Zuko. So the best ones are definitely going to be instants too, by the way, because Firelord Zuko has a huge firebending ability, right? Just baseline, that's 2 power. So he's firebending 2, just baseline. He's adding 2 mana when he's attacking. But the higher his power becomes, the more and more firebending he's doing, and he could generate like 5 or more red mana whenever he's attacking. So instants are going to be the best way of actually utilizing that firebending. So Opera Love Song is impulse draw for 2 mana at instant speed. Endblaze Epiphany is removal that we can sink all that firebending mana into, and it's also impulse draw on top of it. And Bituminous Blast, it's a little cute. It's a little cutesy. It's only 4 damage, but it's a great way of sinking all the firebending mana into it. You can pick off smaller creatures, and it cascades. And cascade is your casting from exile, so it replaces itself. It's a little bit of card advantage, and it triggers Zuko, which is very cute. Then we obviously, since we're so heavy on like impulse draw and exile matters, we have a lot of really powerful support pieces to fill out the impulse draw package. Commander Lier Portier does more impulse draw, but also gives a mana discount to all your impulse draw. Impending Flux is one of the most overpowered payoffs for an impulse deck, and I'm so shocked that it's only 25 cents because it's basically a one-sided board wipe that can even kill your opponents if the count is high enough. And then Kami's Celebration kind of does both things that Zuko wants to be doing. It puts counters on things when you're casting from exile, but it also impulse draws when you have things that are modified, aka things that have counters on them. So it works very well with what Zuko's doing. Since Zuko's also putting counters on everything, we also have a Counters Matter sub-theme. Araña is another way of impulse drawing, which will add more counters on things, which will make Zuko happy, and then Araña draws us even more cards. It's a cycle. It's really cool. Emperor Bones is one of the best things that we could put counters onto, because every single time we put counters on it, we can just reanimate things that we exiled with Emperor of Bones. Tessak is very cute because it's kind of like proto firebending. All our things with counters on them have haste, and whatever we're attacking, we generate red for each attacking creatures, which is kind of like firebending. It's very cool. So yeah, the list is very cool. It's a combination of impulse draw, counters matters, and casting at instant speed matters too. And you mush them all together, and it's a quite powerful engine going on. I would say this is like either a bracket 2 deck or a bracket 3 deck. It's not as explosive / I win the game / oppressive as Firelord Azula is. So that's why I'm thinking it's just a bracket 2 list. It's not gonna win the game as quickly as Azula will, but it does grow into a sizable threat very, very quickly. And all that damage is all based on just impulse draw, so your hand is always full of gas. So yeah, I don't know. I like the playstyle. I think it's very consistent and very sweet, but I think this is more of a bracket 2 than a bracket 3. Okay, the next one is another very consistent deck that is surprisingly powerful. Garnet, Princess of Alexandria. Just a 2-drop, just an uncommon. And yet, it is a powerhouse when you actually see it in play. 2/2 lifelinker, but when it attacks, you may remove a lore counter from each of any number of sagas you control. Put a +1/+1 counter on Garnet for each lore counter removed this way. So this is a sagas deck. Selesnya sagas. You just want to poop out a ton of sagas and then attack with Garnet. Garnet removes counters, so your sagas keep sagaing, and then Garnet becomes like a 5/5, a 10/10, whatever. And starts smacking people for tons of damage, but also life-linking, so you're gaining oodles of life in the process. It's very sweet for just a 2-drop uncommon. It's kind of wild how good it is. So yeah, bread and butter of this deck is just sagas. Just all the best sagas you can run, all jammed into one deck. Summon Fenrir, just like so much ramping if you're constantly removing counters. Princess Takes Flight is very evil if you're removing counters, because you just constantly exile target creatures, and it takes forever for them to return to the battlefield if you keep removing counters. Elspeth Conquers Death, again, just repeatable removal. Eventually, if you let the saga run out, you stop opponents from casting non-creature spells, and you also reanimate things. It's very good. And then we're a saga deck, so we have a lot of like Enchantress support cards or support cards. Jukai Naturalist just makes all our enchantment spells cost one less. Eliver is a way to pump up Garnet and also draw cards. And then Machiko Reign of Terror is going to pump up Garnet huge, and it's also a saga on top of things. Then, because sagas are also counters matters, we can add counters to our sagas to get value out of them faster with like Grateful Apparition, Smell Fear, all this proliferate, so we can proliferate our sagas, but then also remove sagas with Garnet and go back and forth and get so much value out of them. And then, speaking of value of sagas, Ian Chesterton, just replicate on all our sagas. So if we have extra mana, we get bonus sagas. It's really great. The deck is really fun. It's very, very consistent. It's quite reliant on Garnet being around, but she's just a 2-drop. You can recast her very easily, and just removing counters and adding counters to our sagas is very fun and very powerful. That said, is it bracket 2? Is it bracket 3? I still think it's bracket 2 because it's not doing anything too ridiculous. It's just a very fun, consistent deck, I would say. Next one is Gilgamesh, Master at Arms. This is kind of like mono red equipment Voltron. That's what I would say. Gilgamesh says when it enters or attacks, you look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put any number of equipment cards from among them onto the battlefield. You may put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. When you put one or more equipment on the battlefield this way, you may attach them to one samurai you control. So Gilgamesh, you play Gilgamesh, you attack with Gilgamesh. Each time you're doing so, you look at the top 6 of your library and just shove all the equipments onto the battlefield, and you get to equip one of them each time onto Gilgamesh. So the idea of this deck is loading up on equipments, have a high concentration of equipments in our deck, ramp out Gilgamesh, give him haste ideally, and then start swinging. Start swinging because Gilgamesh is going to generate all that mana advantage, card advantage, just getting all those equipments back onto the battlefield from the top of your library. It's very, very good. So yeah, the deck, the bread and butter, we need a high concentration of equipments. Ideally ones that like give him haste. That's the number one thing that we need to do. So something like Samurai's Katana is great because it gives Gilgamesh +2/+2 trample, but most importantly, it gives him haste. And you can equip for free with Gilgamesh's trigger. Blade of Cells is also great because you equip it onto Gilgamesh, you swing, you get copies of Gilgamesh. They're going to die to the legend rule, but the ETB trigger is still going to happen. You're going to get a bunch of extra triggers that way. And then Genji Glove is probably the best of the best. Gives Gilgamesh double strike, so that's double the damage. And then also an extra combat. So that means an extra combat, even more ridiculous damage, but then also another trigger of Gilgamesh's attack trigger, which is great. So since Gilgamesh is such a great card advantage engine, the main thing we want to be doing here is we want to be focusing on just ramping out Gilgamesh or recasting Gilgamesh. So a lot of our card choices are geared towards mana advantage. So like Beamtown Midstick, it's an equipment, but it also generates treasures. Generator Servant, you cast it, you sacrifice it to cast Gilgamesh and give him haste, so you can start immediately swinging. And like Gimli of the Glittering Caves, it's going to generate treasures. It has double strike. It's also a great equipment holder too. So if Gilgamesh is down or whatever, or you have other equipments to spare, you equip them onto Gimli, and that double strike means double the value, and the treasure tokens is quite nice too. Then other things we're trying to do outside of Gilgamesh, if Gilgamesh dies, Ironcrag Fleet is a way to recast him. If we already have a bunch of equipment on the battlefield and Gilgamesh is just like too much mana to recast, something like Armory Automaton enters, puts all those equipments onto it, goes in swinging, probably can finish the job by itself. And then also same thing with like Gold Warden's Gambit. Like if Gilgamesh gets shut down and we have a bunch of equipment laying around, we cast Gold Warden's Gambit. Hopefully we finish the game off that instead. So yeah, the list it's mono red. I would say it is bracket 2. It can feel oppressive when you curve out into Gilgamesh on turn 4 or whatever. If you hit all your ramp early on and then you get down to Gilgamesh and nobody has an answer for it, it can feel kind of oppressive. But on the other hand, it's also very vulnerable to removal. Obviously, you can see how many artifacts are on the screen right now. Vandal Blasts and whatever can really set this deck back. And obviously, if people snipe Gilgamesh before he gets a swing or whatever, that can really set it back too. And also, I'm not going to run every single bad equipment in the game. So I'm trying to run the best ones. I'm trying to keep the equipment counts really, really high. I think there's at least 30 of them. But you could still have bad RNG and, either hit one equipment or even 0 equipment. That's possible. And so it's inconsistent, is what I'm trying to say. It can be shut down and it can be inconsistent sometimes. So I think it's a bracket 2. I don't think it's a bracket 3. It can run hot, but it can also be shut down fairly easily. So that's my opinion on it, bracket 2. The next budget brew is one of my personal favorites too, out of all the new ones that I've crafted. Goro-Goro and Satoru. This is Grixis Haste Matters / kind of a little bit of a ninja sub-theme going on too. Whenever one or more creatures you control that enter the battlefield this turn deals combat damage to a player, you create a 5/5 red dragon spear creature token with flying, and you can pay 2 mana, creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. So this card poops out dragons, and it's very scary. It poops out 5/5s with flying so consistently. Your opponents are going to have to really deal with you very quickly, or else you're just going to overwhelm the board very, very quickly. You just swing in with hasty dudes, or ninjutsu in ninjas, and you get rewarded with just so many 5/5s. It's kind of ridiculous. So the bread and butter of this deck is just cheap creatures with evasion and haste. 1 to 2 mana. That's it. I think the best card in the entire deck is actually just Phoenix Chick. Believe it or not, it's just a 1 mana flying haste. 1 mana flying haste. That's premium for Goro-Goro and Satoru. It's one of a kind here. And then we have a bunch of 2-drops that do similar things. We have Gurmag Swiftwing, Just a 2-mana Flying Haste makes a 5/5 dragon when it hits. Same thing with like Loyal Apprentice. Loyal Apprentice is even better because every single turn it keeps pooping out new ones. And all of those times, as long as Goro-Goro is on the battlefield and you're hitting people with these little random dudes, you're getting 5/5 dragons at the same time. It's great. And then to reuse these flying hasters, we're going to ninjutsu in ninjas. So we swing in with the flying hasters turn 1, we make a dragon. The next turn, well, they're still on the battlefield. They didn't enter the battlefield this turn. What are we going to do? Well, we swing in with them, and then we ninja in cool ninjas, and then we trigger more dragons with Goro-Goro. That's great. So like Yuffie's amazing, Mistblade Shinobi's amazing, Yuriko's obviously the best of the best because it's like card draw and a lot of a drain effect for your ninja deck. So yeah, ninjas are really, really great here, obviously, too. And then we have more miscellaneous support pieces. Spectacular Showdown is redonkulous in this deck because Double Strike just works really well with Goro-Goro. That means double the dragons we're making. Overpowering attacks, more extra combats just means double the damage, but also double amount of dragons we're making again. And then Satoru, the Infiltrator, every single time we're ninjutsuing and all that good stuff, we're also drawing a bunch of cards too on a 2-drop, which is great. The deck is super fun, and I think it's going to get a lot of really good additions from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because there is a bunch of new ninjas, and Sneak works really well with this deck too. So yeah, I feel like this deck is about to get a lot better with the upcoming set. Is this bracket 2 or bracket 3? I honestly don't know. I think it's definitely strong at bracket 2. But not unbeatable. Like if you just keep killing the commander, then the dragons don't appear, and then the deck has a lot less kill potential without the commander. But it is just a 3-drop, and you do run a lot of protection to make sure the Goro-Goro sticks around. Is it bracket 3 level? I think so. I think it could hang at bracket 3. So I don't know, bracket 2, bracket 3, somewhere there. The next one is another powerhouse though. Iroh Grand Lotus. This is Timur. Basically path in flames in the command zone and very busted when you run a bunch of busted lessons with it. It's a 6-mana Timur, firebending 2. During your turn, each non-lesson instant and sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. The flashback cost is equal to the card's mana value. However, during your turn, each lesson card in your graveyard has just flashback of 1. So regular instant sorceries, regular mana cost. Lessons though, just 1. Just 1. That's insane. So this is primarily a lessons deck. There's a lot of good lessons that were printed in Avatar, and there's a couple that are kind of decent in Strixhaven. There's probably going to be a lot better ones coming up in the upcoming Strixhaven set too, by the way. But yeah, we have more than enough to focus primarily on lessons. Accumulate Wisdom, obviously amazing. Draw 3 for 2 is great. Shared Roots, just a rampant growth is already very good. And Overwhelming Victory is a great way to like just pump up the team and snipe a creature. And all of these get insane. So these are all good cards by themselves, and they just all become insane when you cast them for 1 mana. Like a 1 mana Overwhelming Victory, bananas, crazy. Accumulate Wisdom is already great for 2 mana, and we've seen it being just literally Ancestral Recall for 1 mana in Standard. Well, it's going to be 1 mana for here too. It's really good. And then obviously we're like a instant sorcery deck that cares about the graveyard. So we're doing stuff like Gran Gran. Gran Gran probably will not be tapped that often. Master Paku's not in this deck. And she doesn't really attack very well. But because we're a lessons deck, all our non-creature spells will cost 1 less to cast. As long as there are 3 or more lessons in our graveyard. And if it's a lesson in our graveyard that we want to cast with Iroh, that means our lessons cost 0 mana. 0 mana as long as we have 3 or more lessons in our graveyard with Gran Gran out and Iroh out. That's kind of insane. We also have a bunch of ways, thematic ways of filling our graveyard for more options with Iroh to flashback. Nightmares and Daydreams is one of those. We just mill ourselves a bunch of times, and then we draw a bunch of cards. And the Glacier Wood Siege, we're usually choosing Temur, because then we can cast instant sorceries and mill ourselves. But these cards actually turn into win conditions for us too. When we're storming off and we have enough cards in our graveyard, we just mill our opponents, and we can mill our opponents enough to actually mill them out. I swear to you, it's actually doable. Now, our regular win conditions, however, are usually like these type of 3 cards. Impending Flux, believe it or not, kills people quite consistently in this deck. We're basically Lesson Storm. We cast a whole bunch of spells in our graveyard in a single turn, 10 or more, and then we eventually cast Impending Flux, maybe flash it back to, and we're dealing 10 plus damage to our opponent's faces and their creatures too at the same time. We also have a bunch of lessons that happen to be earthbending, one of the best ones being Cracked Earth Technique. So we just animate all our lands, and then we flash back, animate more of our lands, swing with everything. We can even pump up the team with like Overwhelming Victory. We pick off a small creatures and give all our creatures plus something, and deal even more damage that way. The deck is very strong. I would not play this in bracket 2. I would probably stick to bracket 3 for this. The main downside, though, is that Iroh is 6 mana. Iroh is 6 mana, and if your opponents know what's up with Lesson Storm, they're going to hold up their removal for Iroh and try to shut him down before you can pop off. Easier said than done, though, because the deck is basically just a hodgepodge of amazing green ramp options to get Iroh out and possibly recast him. We're in blue, so that means we have also protection spells. So either we just have the mana to recast Iroh, which sucks because it takes an extra turn, or we can just, protect Iroh. Or, we could just flash back counter spells from our graveyard too. If Iroh manages to stick on the battlefield and then somebody tries to remove it, we could pop off in response to removal, is what I mean. The deck is quite powerful when it's allowed to go. It's not the fastest deck, obviously, and it can be shut down, but I do think it's better suited to bracket 3 than bracket 2, because nobody wants to sit 3 or 15-minute turns in bracket 2. And at bracket 3, I mean, if you let Iroh live, then that's kind of on you, right? Next up is a funny one. This is Simic, but weird Simic. It's Jackal, Genius, Geneticist. It's a 1/1 Trampler that says whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value equal to Jackal's power, copy that spell except the copy isn't legendary, then put a +1/+1 counter on Jackal. So Jackal is like an ultra efficient cloner that he costs only 2 mana, and he can start cloning every single creature spell you're casting, provided, though, the mana value matches Jackal's power. And it even gets around the legend rule too. So if you're copying legendaries, both copies get to stick around. That's really, really exciting. It's just an interesting puzzle to break. So the way I broke it is the deck is focused very, very heavily on low, like 1 to 3 to 4 mana creatures, and it's almost all creatures. So we always have options to clone with Jackal, and we're trying to keep like a fairly even distribution, with skewing more to the lower end than the higher end. Like we want a lot of 1-drops, and then a little bit less 2-drops, and a little bit less 3-drops, so we can always like get Jackal's power going that way. So like on 1-drop, we got Insidious Fungus. It can be ramp, it can be interaction. On 2, we got Coiling Oracle. It's a little bit of card draw, sometimes it's ramp. And then on 3, we got Sutina. It's basically a Farhaven elf, but it's a legendary and you can copy it, which is funny. And then since Jackal is putting counters on itself, we can actually manipulate those counters to make sure we're copying our creatures basically all the time. So like Oaka, for example, if we want to cast a 2-drop and copy it with Jackal, but Jackal is 3 power, we can use Oaka to remove a counter, draw a card that way, and now we can cast our 2-drop creature and clone it with Jackal. Same thing with Zamek Guildmage. It's a little bit worse because you have to pay mana to remove the counters, but you don't have to tap it, so you can remove multiple counters in a single turn. And because Jackal does have a bunch of counters on him at any given time, we do have a little bit of a counter sub-theme going on too. Ripple's Potential being a great option of phasing out Jackal for just 2 mana to protect him and other creatures that have counters on them. We also have a little bit of like a copy matters payoff sub-theme going on too. I did splurge a lot of money, $9 of the $45 budget, for Adrix and Nev twin casters, which for some reason, this version that you're showing on the screen from the deck tech that I did not choose has no text. So editor me will have the regular version show up on the screen, and basically whenever you like copy something, you make another copy, I believe, is what the text says. I cannot read it because I see a serial version. Anyway, Octomancer, though, also makes copies of things that have copies, and same thing with Errant Street Artist. If we copy a spell with Jackal, we get to copy that copy with Errant, and, it gets around the legendary rule. So if we get to copy the Errants, then we get to copy a lot of things, and it's very funny. This deck is sweet. It's just a copy machine. It's, playing around with the counters to make sure we copy as many times as possible per turn. There's a lot of ramp. There's a lot of card draw, as you would expect for Simic decks. So if Jackal dies, if our board gets wiped, it's pretty easy to just keep going. That said, it's not going to win the game super fast or anything like that. I feel like this is a very, very typical bracket 2 list. It does a lot of dirtly nonsense, and eventually you're just going to have a critical mass of creatures and smack people in the face with it. But we're here to dirtle. We're here to interact. We're not here to win the game super, super fast or be super oppressive. So I think this is a very typical bracket 2 list. All right. Original Kalia was one of the very first budget brews I ever made for MTG Goldfish. I think it was like back in 2015 or something like that. And I've always been eyeing the newer Kalia for a while now and wanted to make a budget brew around them because I kind of like this version even more than the OG. I know that's kind of treasonous to say, but this one's much more consistent, I would say. And it's like $11, but with a budget of $45, I managed to make it work anyway. So this version of Kalia is a little bit cheaper. It's only 3 mana. It's a 3/3 flying vigilance. And instead of cheating out angels, demons, and or dragons, she instead draws them. So instead of putting them on the battlefield, she draws them for you. So when it enters, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You reveal an angel card, a demon card, and or a dragon card from among them, and put them into your hand, put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. So we want to have a high concentration of angels, demons, and dragons, and we want to have a relatively even distribution of them too, so we can draw up to 3 cards every single time we ETB Kalia. So the way I'm building the deck is, first and foremost, since Kalia is a draw engine in our command zone, I'm focusing a lot on creatures and things that, can be drawn by Kalia, but also generate mana. So the Balrog of Moria, typically you're not aiming to cast this, you're just trying to cycle it. When you cycle it, you create 2 treasure tokens. Rakdos, Lord of Riots, huge mana discount on our creatures, which are all going to be relatively high mana cost, so it's one of the best mana discounts in our deck. And a relatively new mana rock that is great for Kalia is Furdoch Core, because it counts as a demon, a dragon, and or an angel. Any of those will fit, so we could draw it off Kalia very easily, and it's a mana rock, so it's great here. And then, because Kalia is such a great card advantage engine, we have a bunch of spells, like angels and stuff, that can bounce her and reuse her ETB ability. So Guardian of Girapur allows us to blink any creature, including Kalia. Flock Imposter, it's an angel, a demon, or a dragon. It can return her back to our hand and recast her, and she's just 3 mana, so it's very easy to do so. Restoration Angel, another one. Flash Blink, even. So those are ways of just getting more and more angels, demons, and dragons into our hand with Kalia's ETB ability. And then, because we have so many cards in our hand, we're constantly drawing cards off Kalia. We're going to be discarding down to hand size pretty often, and we have like a lot of like angels, demons, and dragons that like put themselves in the graveyard for various reasons, usually cycling. So we have a lot of reanimation happening too. Bringer of the Last Gift is the best one. If we have a graveyard full of big fatty creatures, Bringer of the Last Gift is just a living death on a demon form. Karmic Guide is a classic. It's an angel that ETB reanimates. And then some of them are just things we actually want in the graveyard, like Rakshasa Debaser. We can encore and then start reanimating all our opponent's creatures all in one encore swing. So that's all really sweet. And yeah, that's basically the deck. It's just a bunch of angels, demons, and dragons. Some of them that could be cast for cheaper than their mana value. A lot of them ramp, a lot of them blink, a lot of them reanimate. And we just try to overwhelm the board with really big fatties off Kalia's really strong ETB trigger. There's a lot of blinking, there's a lot of ramping, there's a lot of big creatures. And if you like Kalia and you want to run something that isn't the OG, I know she's very popular, and no shade to her. I really like her too. This is just a different take on that really cool character. I would say, though, this is a very solid bracket 2 deck. It's not a very fast deck, but it's very cool. It's very resilient. It's a very resilient deck. It has a lot of answers. It has a lot of big creatures that make it hard for you to be attacked, and obviously built-in ways of killing your opponents with big 5/5 flyers. It's very fun, but it's not bracket 3. It's very much bracket 2. All right, the next one is another funky one that I really like. It's Katilda and Lier, This is basically humans and instants and sorceries mushed together. Katilda and Lier is Bant. Whenever you cast a human spell, target instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. So the idea here is basically fill your deck up with these relatively cheap instants and sorceries that provide some amount of value, and then cast relatively cheap humans so that you can cast a human and still have the mana to flashback a spell, and you're just getting a ton of extra value, ton of extra card advantage and recursion off all your human spells. Instants and sorceries that we're looking to flashback with our commander. Consider 1-mana spells that cantrip, perfect here, especially with the Surveil. I hate that freaking the artwork burns my eyes. The redness hurts me. I don't know why the deck tech picks that art, but whatever, we're going to roll with it. There's a couple cards, though, that work particularly well if you cast them from the graveyard, so they're extra spicy with Katilda. Esper Origins, for example, if you cast it from the graveyard, you immediately flip it over into a Saga and See the Truth. If you cast it from outside your hand, it's just 2 mana, draw 3 cards. So it's basically the Ancestral Call, but from the graveyard when you flash it back, which is very cool. And in terms of the humans that we're running, we're focusing very heavily on flash creatures. And the reason we want to do that is because it allows us to flash back counter spells and stuff that are more time sensitive on our opponent's turns. So for example, Cathar Commander, just 2 mana. It can be a disenchant when we need it, but 2 mana flash, we can flash a counter spell or whatever on an opponent's turn when we need to. Venser's Shaper Savant is a classic. It's a bounce spell by itself, but then also we can flash back at instant speed. And the Blue Spirit kind of ties everything together. It's also human, but it enables flash for all our creatures, and it draws us cards when we're flashing in people's combats too. And then in terms of things that kind of tie both humans and the instant and sorcery themes together, Rimefire Torque, it's kind of perfect for this. We just have a bunch of humans entering the battlefield, and that puts charge counters on the Torque, and that allows us to copy instant sorceries that we're casting when we remove counters from it. Angel of Glorious Rise, all our creatures are humans, so if we get board wiped and we have a bunch of creatures in our graveyard, Angel of Glorious Rise is a mastery animation as well. And if we're playing against an opponent who's playing zombies, they're going to have a very sad time. And then Mass Appeal, this is the perfect sorcery to flash back in this deck. We just draw a bunch of cards and then cast it, draw a bunch of cards again. The deck is very fun. It's very unique. Mixing together a creature-human deck and instant sorceries is quite the challenge. You need to have our even distribution of human spells and instant sorceries, and you have to keep in mind, mana cost, because you can only flash back on that same turn that you cast the human. So it's a lot of things to juggle. It's an interesting puzzle to break, but the end result is quite fun. I think this is a bracket 2 deck. It's not doing anything super busted or anything, but it is a fun one for sure. I highly recommend it. Next up, we have another one that is flashy and focusing on doing things on your opponent's turns, but I would say it's actually stronger than Katilda and Lier. This is Kian, Corrupted Memory. It's a Simic creature that says, it's a 2/2 that says when its power is even, you may cast non-creature spells as though they had flash, and as long as its power is odd, you may cast creature spells as though they had flash, and whenever you draw a card, you put +1/+1 counter on Kian. So it basically gives flash to your non-creature and creature spells, but it only does for one side or the other at a given time, and you can swap which ones you have flash by just increasing Kian's power, usually by just drawing cards, and it grows very, very fast, because whenever you're drawing cards, you grow Kian. It sounds very silly, it sounds a little bit convoluted, and it is, but it is actually quite powerful. So the type of things we're going to be doing that is really powerful to flash in, Hornet's Nest is a classic one. If we have flash creatures, we can flash in Hornet's Nest in response to somebody attacking us, block it, and then boom, we have a bunch of insect creatures for 3 mana. Body of Knowledge is also hilarious. We ambush a creature, we probably kill them too, and then we draw a whole bunch of cards in the process and grow Body of Knowledge. Hunter's Bow, we can start turning sorcery speed removal into instant speed removal. Somebody has a creature that we want to kill at instant speed, we flash in Hunter's Bow, we attach it to Kian, it fights that creature, or bites that creature rather, and boom, it's dead with a sorcery speed removal, which is very cool. So a lot of the type of shenanigans we're doing with Can. We're just like breaking cards by giving everything flash and taking advantage of that a lot. And then ways of making sure we're always casting spells with flash whenever we want to. Opt, for example, is a great way, like little cantrips that let you draw at instant speed, allow us to swap from casting non-creature spells to creature spells when we cast Opt. Oaka is another way of swapping between which type of spells have flash by just removing a counter from our commander, so we change her power. And then the Blue Spirit is a way to like just permanently give our creatures flash. So we just have to focus on making sure our non-creatures have flash, and then all our spells have flash. So yeah, Blue Spirit is showing up a lot because it's a very good card. We've got a ton of cards that kind of support this draw-go playstyle. Rashmi, Waybreak, Hippocamp, all these cards care about you casting spells on your opponent's turns, and they will reward you a lot for that. And Wilderness Reclamation is great, just mass untapping all your lands, and that allows you to cast all your spells on your opponent's turns as well, and that's really cool. Yeah, the deck is really fun. It kills out of nowhere very quickly. That's why I would say like it might be bracket 3. It's definitely like a very solid bracket 2, but it might be bracket 3 just because Kian grows so fast. Kian grows so fast. There's going to be a 10-10 when you blink, and then she starts killing people with Voltron damage. And then outside of that, just playing Drago is inherently very powerful. Just having all your answers up at any given time is very strong. Your Simic color is the best colors in Commander, so you have the best ramp, you have the best card draw, and you have a lot of really good answers to everything. Yeah, I think the deck is really good. I want to say tentative bracket 3, probably maybe just bracket 2 though. But yeah, it's a really strong one. Next one we have is arguably, I would say one of like the top 3 strongest budget brews in this video, Kraven the Hunter. It's a 3-mana Golgari, 4/3 Trampler. Whenever a creature an opponent controls with the greatest power among creatures that player controls dies, draw a card and put a +1/+1 counter on Kraven the Hunter. Now, I keep saying this, but in Commander, if you are running a commander that rewards you heavily for disrupting your opponent's game plans, that's going to be an inherently very powerful commander. And Kraven definitely checks that box. It's only 3 mana, and it's going to draw you a card and grow Kraven every single time you're killing your opponent's creatures, aka putting their game plan far, far behind. And you can draw up to 3 cards in a single spell, because we're going to be running stuff like Gix's Command, Sat's Will. These all make your opponents sacrifice the most powerful creature they have on the battlefield, and if there's 3 creatures, like one creature for each opponent, and they all have to sacrifice their biggest one, casting Gix's Command or Sat's Will or whatever means you're putting your opponents behind by killing their biggest thing, but then also you're drawing 3 cards off Kraven, and you're growing him by 3, and also he has Trample, by the way. And you know, killing the biggest creature, that's great, but if we just constantly kill our opponent's creatures, their biggest ones are going to be gone too. So something like a Cursive Marauder and all these, like every opponent has to sacrifice a creature type spells, are also going to trigger Kraven and also going to make our opponents miserable, and we draw cards off their tiers. So yeah, that's basically the deck. Is we're just going to be removing all our opponent's creatures and their non-creature stuff too. We're just going to kill all our opponent's stuff and draw cards in the process. And there's also some support cards that also reward us for killing our opponent's stuff. Vraska, for example, turns the creatures we kill into treasures, but they also are like keep their ETBs and whatever, which is very funny. Masamune just doubles the triggers on Kraven, maybe forces some unfortunate blocks. Xenos flips into an 8/8 dragon, is a mini board wipe, and can possibly win us the game faster than usual. The deck is just like a pile of super ultra efficient removal, all sorts of removal, makes our opponents very, very sad while we're drawing 3+ cards in a single turn. Kraven gets really big. We Voltron kill people, or just kill people with whatever creatures we have laying around, because our opponents can't block because all the creatures are always dead. It's a miserable deck to play against, I would say, but it's very, very effective at what it's doing. Definitely a bracket 3. Do not play this in bracket 2 unless you hate your friends. Play this in bracket 3. That's where it's more appropriate at. It's not even a slow deck. It's like a very solid bracket 3 deck. And if you juice it up a little bit, it could definitely be a bracket 4 very easily. Just killing your opponents and drawing cards in the process, turns out, is a very good strategy. Next up, we have Kuja, Genome Sorcerer, one of the most popular and most requested commanders from Final Fantasy for me, and a lot of people have been asking me to do a budget brew, so I'm happy to oblige. This is Rakdos Wizard Pingers, basically. At the beginning of your end step, create a 0/1 black wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent, and then if you control 4 or more wizards, it flips over, and now all your wizards deal double damage instead of their regular damage, which is very nice. So basically, we're focused on wizard pinging and specifically casting non-creature spells. So we have a couple wizards that already ping by themselves, like Coruscation Mage. That's great. And then we have a bunch of other spells that like just generate wizard pingers. Not that many, actually, but a couple. Circle of Power being one of the best. Transpose being one of the best. Just like pinging, gaining life, and making more wizards is always good. And then if we have Kuja on the battlefield, we get another wizard too. That's great. Once we start pinging and have pingers on the battlefield, we start doing pinging shenanigans and pinging payoffs. Torwaki the Younger just adds an extra damage whenever we're pinging with our pingers. So it basically doubles the damage of our wizards. And also when we're casting instant or sorceries, we're also dealing 3 damage to stuff. And he has lifelink, which is great, because our deck is basically mostly instant sorceries. Chandra Incinerator is an MVP of this deck. Whenever we're pinging our opponent's faces, we're also dealing that much damage to our opponent's creatures. So we just start pinging off all our opponent's creatures at the same time. And Virtue of Courage turns all that pinging into card advantage, which is also great. It's impulse draw. We can only do it for that turn, but that's pretty awesome for Rakdos, I would say. And then to really pop off, we have stuff like Mizzix's Mastery, cast all the instants and sorceries in our graveyard, and every single instant sorcery we cast, by the way, is more pinging damage with our wizards. Same thing with Invoke Calamity. We cast Invoke Calamity, and then we cast a bunch of other spells, and then bada bing, bada boom, everybody is taking a bunch of damage. And while we're doing all these things, Stormkiln Artist, we're a Spellslinger deck, we're making a bunch of treasures at the same time. That's all good. And yeah, it's Rakdos, it's Burn, it's Spellslinger, it's Wizards. It's a good time. It's a good time. Your opponents are going to die pretty fast. And yeah, it's kind of a race. It's a great deck to bust out when everybody's like, all right, guys, we have one more game in us. Let's make it a quick one. You bring out Kuja, you start burning people. Either they shut you down or you shut them down. Yeah, but the game's going to end pretty quick. I would say, though, this is a bracket 2 deck. Maybe sometimes bracket 3. No, not really bracket 3. I would say it's a solid bracket 2. Solid bracket 2 list. Okay, here's another fun one. Yes, it's another mono blue deck. I've been noticing that I might have made a lot of mono blue decks, but they're fun and they're very different. This one is Lady Octopus Inspired Inventor. This is a draw-go artifact deck that is cheating out artifacts for fun value. It's very silly. Okay, it says whenever you draw your first or second spell card each turn, put an Ingenuity counter on Lady Octopus and you tap it. You may cast an artifact spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to the number of Ingenuity counters on Lady Octopus without paying its mana cost. And this also gets around timing restrictions, so you can cast artifacts that don't have flash on your opponent's turns by tapping Octopus and using its ability this way. So it's a 1-drop. It's a 1-drop commander. You play Lady Octopus, and then you just start drawing extra cards each turn, which means more counters on Lady Octopus, and then you're allowed to cheat in bigger and bigger artifacts on your opponent's turns with like pseudo flash with Lady Octopus. It gets wild very, very quickly, and it does a bunch of very silly things. So to get the ball rolling, on the first couple turns, we were loaded with artifacts like Conjurer's Bauble and Cryogen Relic. These are things that either enter the battlefield, draw you a card to trigger Lady Octopus, or like you can sacrifice it to draw a card, like Conjurer's Bauble, for example. One of the best MVPs, though, is not an artifact at all. It's Riddlesmith. Whenever you're casting an artifact spell, you get to loot. So that's triggering Lady Octopus like crazy, and it's putting a bunch of Ingenuity counters on her. And once you have a bunch of counters on her, then you can start casting more impressive artifacts. And really getting around the timing restriction is the biggest draw of Lady Octopus, because a lot of cards get so much better if you can start doing it in response to your opponent's turns. For example, Ariet's Tempting Apple. It's a threatened ability, which is fine on your turn, but it's so much cooler when somebody goes to swing at you and you steal somebody else's creature as a surprise blocker with Ariad's Tempting Apple. It's so cool. Fraying Line is probably my favorite card in the entire deck. This card goes from essentially being not a really strong card to basically one of the most overpowered board wipes in the deck if you can cast it at instant speed on the upkeep before your turn, because nobody gets a chance to put a rope counter on any of their creatures. Only you do, and then everything dies. Everything dies. It's so good. Then we also got like Soul of New Phyrexia. Somebody tries to wipe the board. Oh, surprise! I flash in Soul of New Phyrexia, and now all of a sudden all my permanents have indestructible. It's heroic intervention with a lot of extra steps, but it's only 69 cents. Nice. And once you're popping off with Lady Octopus, the more times you untap her, the more activations you get, baby. So stuff like Mirror and Spy, absolutely redonkulous. You tap Lady Octopus, you cast an artifact spell, Mirror and Spy lets you untap her. You just do it, boom, 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 get all those artifacts onto the battlefield in a single glorious turn. Sting, untap her every single turn, even gives her haste. And then we have a bunch of like 1-mana spells that give her hexproof. So if somebody's trying to get cheeky and kill our commander, we can give her hexproof, protect her, but also untap her to activate her again. And then to finish the game, we're doing artifact things. Cyber Drive Awakener, we just turn all our creatures into 4/4 flyers, kill somebody in the air. Kappa Kinnear, unblockable, does a lot of damage. And also we're drawing cards like crazy in this deck to, get those ingenuity counters. Psychosis Crawler, great way to burn out the table once we're drawing cards. The deck is super, super fun, very, very unique, and runs utterly trash-looking cards. Like, these cards are guaranteed not to see that much play in any format, let alone Commander. So there are definitely bulk bin cards like Guild Globe and stuff. Prophetic Prism, Lembus Bread. Like, yeah, you're going to find them laying around in the junk piles. And they're fantastic. They're fantastic in this deck. They make the Lady Octopus makes them look so cool. So this is one of my favorite artifact decks. How good is it? I don't know. Like, you're doing a bunch of dumb stuff, but how strong are the dumb stuff? With a serious budget restriction, you can't really have access to like the strongest artifact spells that kill people really quick. So I would still say this is a bracket 2 list. If you up the budget, obviously, and you had more impressive looking artifacts to cast for free, then surely it could become bracket 3 or even higher. But as is, with our modest budget, I would say bracket 2, very solid, maybe bracket 3. Next deck, though, is an impressive one. Lyse Hext is Azorius Voltron with, I think it's like basically an Auras deck too. I would say it's like Azorius, Auras, Voltron, and it does it in a very scary way. I feel like this is an underrated Voltron commander. It's a 2/2 of prowess. Non-creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and as long as you cast 2 or more non-creature spells this turn, Lyse Hext has double strike. So if you cast a bunch of spells, if you cast 2 or more spells, she's a double striker, and if they're non-creature spells, they both cost 1 less to cast, and they both pumped up Lyse Hext by 2. So imagine like you cast 2 non-creature spells in a single turn. Lyse Hext is at least a 4/4, and you've saved 2 mana usually on casting them. That's a lot of value on a 3-drop and makes her a really great candidate for a Voltron deck. So the type of cards we want to put on Lyse Hext, we have a bunch of different auras. Combat Research, great if we give her double strike, because that means double the cards we're drawing each turn. And since she's legendary, she also gets a little bit of a power boost and Ward 1. Chains of Custody is another way of protecting her with Ward 2 and gets to remove something scary on the board as well until somebody gets to remove our commander. And giving her unblockable is very nice with Security Bypass. Only costs 1 mana with Lyse Hext on the battlefield. Becomes unblockable, gets to connive a bunch of times too. And then we're running a bunch of Voltron spells to make sure that Lyse Hext doesn't die. Water Wings, again, is being fantastic here. Base power 4, so she gets a power boost. She has hexproof when we need it, or if we just want to swing in for a lot of damage. Just flying 4/4 is very nice. Base power. We're running cards like Promise of Loyalty because we don't have that many creatures. People are going to be incentivized to hit us because we're going to hit them back even harder. So Promise of Loyalty, we don't lose anything. Our opponents lose a bunch of creatures, and whatever is remaining cannot hit us anyway. And then cheeky cards like With Great Power. If we're just spending so many resources protecting Lyse Hext and making sure she's a huge one-shot machine, With Great Power is a great way to make sure that our life total doesn't really go down that much. It's a huge finisher too in an aura deck because, Lyse Hext can get like +10/+10 or something and gets into lethal one-shot territory. And then, if people aren't dead, then it's going to be very hard for them to alpha strike us back because that damage is being redirected to Lyse Hext and she's not dying. So it's a really cool, cheeky card. And then to really finish the game, we have stuff like Tempest Technique, grows her really, really big. Sage's Reverie draws us a whole bunch of cards, refills her hands, also grows Lyse Hext, and same thing with like Auramancer's Guise. Just gives her a ton of power and even vigilance, so we're safe. We have a blocker in case of a potential crackback. This is my cheapest deck out of the 45 decks. It's currently only $27, so probably in a couple months from now, it actually won't be over $45. This one might be still within budget even a year from now. I went really much under budget because I aimed to make this one like $20 or something a while back, and then I boosted it a little bit. And I was like, you know what? I don't need to make it $45. The deck is already gas, even at a low budget. Why push the budget if it's already quite strong? I think this one's still a bracket 3, actually. It could be stronger if you had a higher budget. It will be faster, more mana efficient, whatnot. But it's just everything about the commander just pushes it towards being a fantastic Voltron killer. So I think it's actually good in bracket 3. Bracket 2, it might be a little bit too oppressive. Bracket 3, people should have either answers or go fast enough to deal with Lyse Hext more consistently. But I think this is a bracket 3 deck. Here's a new one that is quite popular. I think this is the most popular one from Lorwyn Eclipse. It's Marilyn Fae Ascendant. It's basically either elf or fairy tribal or both, and it mixes elves, fairies, and theft, and it's Sultai. So it's a 4/5 flyer. Whenever Marilyn or another elf or fairy you control enters, exile the top 2 cards of target opponent's library. Once each turn, you may cast a spell with mana value less than or equal to the number of elves and fairies you control from among them. Exile with Marilyn without paying its mana cost. So Marilyn is a very mana efficient theft commander. As long as you're casting your elves and fairies, you're passively stealing your opponent's stuff. And you get to cast them for free if you have enough elves and fairies on the battlefield. However, you do have to stick to timing restrictions. So if you want to cast a sorcery spell for free with Marilyn's ability, you have to cast it whenever you can cast a sorcery. So typically on your main phase. You can get around that, though, if you have flash enablers. So if you have ways of casting spells at any time, you can now cast your opponent's spells on everybody's turn, not just your own. So the deck is very flash, draw, go heavy, and typically people go for fairies because fairies are typically, a draw, go style deck. However, the problem with this is that fairies are very expensive. A lot of the best fairy cards and the fairy flash enablers and stuff like that are a lot of money. Even spell stutter sprites, like $5 or something like that. It's insane. So for budget reasons, we're going to stick with elves, and don't worry, it works just as well, if not better, focusing on elves over fairies. So the vast majority of our elves are going to be mana dorks because Marilyn is going to be providing all the card advantage we need. We're just casting our opponent's spells and not worrying too much about the card draw aspect of our own. So Elvish Mystic, Coiling Oracle, Priest of Titania are generating oodles and oodles of mana for us and also triggering Marilyn's theft abilities. And then in terms of flash enablers, Final Word Phantom is probably the best one in the entire deck because it allows us to cast a spell on each of our opponent's turns. And for some reason, it's only 35 cents, unlike some other ones, which are like $15. So this one kind of flew under the radar, I guess. Kian, Corrupted Memory from before, shows up here too, because again, it's also a flash enabler for our opponent's stolen spells. And Vivian gives all the creatures flash. It doesn't help for all types of creature types or card types, but it does allow us to cast any stolen creatures on everybody's turns at instant speed. And then we have various support cards. We have theft support cards like Gaunty Knight Minister. Every single time we're casting spells off Marilyn's trigger, we're also getting a treasure token, and we're encouraging each other to hit each other. And because we have a lot of elves, High Perfect Morkant is just going to machine gun down our opponent's creatures and look stylish doing so. And we do have some fairies as well, like Nimrus, for example, because it's rewarding us for casting spells on our opponent's turns. And we do have a lot of ways of casting on our opponent's turns. The deck is quite strong, and by focusing on elves, we have the mana to cheat out Marilyn pretty fast and also recast her if she dies. And yeah, despite fairies being probably the more popular routes to go with her, I would say elves are probably still stronger than going fairies. I know it's personal preference and stuff, but elves provide way more mana options than the fairies do, and they can draw cards just as well, if not better, than fairies too. So yeah, I just think that the elf version, this version, despite, you know, being out of necessity because you can't afford the expensive fairies on a tight budget, I think it actually turns out to be a very, very optimal way of doing it too. Is it bracket 3 or is it bracket 2? I think this is definitely a bracket 2 list. It's not like super fast or anything like that. It does scale up a little bit based on what your opponents are playing. Like if your opponents have better spells to steal, then obviously Marilyn's theft ability is going to be more powerful than if your opponents are running like jank precons or whatever. But yeah, I think it's a very strong bracket 2 list. It's pretty well rounded. It has a lot of ramp potential. Board wipes are obviously going to slow it down. It is an elf deck, so if you're eating board wipes left and right, then it's going to be taking a while for you to recover. And Marilyn does cost 5 mana, so recasting her a bunch of times is a little bit annoying to do. But yeah, that's the main downside of this deck, is if you eat a lot of board wipes, the deck slows down a whole bunch. So I think it's more of a bracket 2 deck than a bracket 3. All right, friends, here we go. This is my favorite bracket 2 nonsense deck. It's here to just basically do silly things. And so far, everyone I've played against with this list has just enjoyed it. It is the latest deck that has been included to my paper collection. It's pretty low power, but it is very funny. It's a clone deck that turns everything into the moon, and yeah, it's just a fun time. It's a funny time. Not a very strong deck, but it's a very funny deck. I got inspiration for this deck by watching Amy the Amazonian. She did a Brawl Star video with Princess Yue, which is 1v1, and she said in that video that she got the inspiration from a Discord member from her Discord that played a commander deck of Princess Yue. So now it's kind of gone full circle. Like Amy found a commander deck of Princess Yue and turned it into Brawl, and then I watched Amy's Brawl deck and turned it into a commander deck, and here we are. So Princess Yue says, when it dies, if she was a non-land creature, return this card to the battlefield tapped under your control. She's a land named Moon, and she gains tap, add 1 colorless mana, and you can also tap her to scry 2, and she's also still legendary when she becomes the Moon. So the idea of this deck is you're running a whole bunch of clones, and the first thing you do with these clones is you have Princess Yue on the battlefield, you play the clone enters as a copy of Princess Yue. It will die due to the legend rule. You keep the original Princess Yue and you let the clone version die, and it will come back as a moon. But then it will come back as a moon, but it will still be a clone, so it can come back as a copy, like have the card text of a creature on the battlefield, but it will still be a moon. It will still not have any other card type. And it will still get to tap for mana, for one colorless mana. So for example, if you have Phyrexian Metamorph and Princess Yue, you cast Phyrexian Metamorph, you copy Princess Yue, it will immediately die, and it can come back copying something else. If you wanted to, you can copy like one other creature you control, or one of your opponent's creatures, or artifact they control, and then it will be a land named Moon. It can tap for colorless, and it will have like the other the card text of whatever thing it copied. And also, interestingly, in the case of Phyrexian Metamorph, it will not be an artifact in addition to its other types. It will just be a land, because Princess Yue, layer 4, She says she's a type change, and she says it's a land named Moon. It's not a land in addition to its other types. It's just a land, nothing else. And the Phyrexian Metamorph is layer 1 effect, and the card type change with Princess Yue is a level 4 effect, which supersedes it. And it's weird, and it's nonsense, and I love it. And that's what I love about this deck, is all just layer nonsense and learning about Magic and its weird complexity and the beauty of Magic through a janky bracket 2 list. That's my spiel. That's my pitch for why I love this deck so much. Okay, so like I said, the bulk of this deck is all about clones. We have like things like Naga Fleshcrafter, which can clone anything on the battlefield. Blade of Shared Souls is very funny because you can like equip any creature you control and make that equipped creature become a copy of Princess Yue, so immediately dies and comes back as a moon. And Mirror Image, another clone that you could just copy anything, but only the things you control. But it's only 3 mana, which is nice. It's a little bit of a mana discount. So we're copying a lot of our opponent's stuff, but there are some really cute cards in our deck that we want to copy as well. So for example, Fallow Sage, when it becomes a moon, when we make a moon copy of it, we're tapping it for mana, right? And every single time we're tapping the moon copy of Fallow Sage, we get to draw a card. Whenever we're tapping the moon copy of Church Spanner, we could pay 2 mana and bounce a permanent. Whenever we tap the moon copy of Scaretiller, we get to ramp out a land from our hand or graveyard. It's very silly. So the moon copies, the lane copies of these cards get infinitely better because we're tapping them for mana and we're just getting this free value out of them. Then there's also infinite combos to actually win the game, because winning the game is actually hard. There's silly combos like Princess Yue, Wurmfang Newt, and Rune Crab. So if you have Princess Yue, Wurmfang Newt, and Rune Crab on the battlefield, you can play clone, copy the Princess Yue, it comes back as a moon, and then have the clone copy the Wurmfang Newt. And Wurmfang Newt says when it enters, you exile a land you control from the game, and that when the Newt leaves play or leaves the battlefield, you return the removed card to play under its owner's control. So the way this works, you see, is that the moon clone copying Yue, it comes back as a moon, but now the clone is going to be copying Wurmfang Newt. It gets to enter the battlefield trigger. You have to exile a land until it leaves the battlefield. You exile itself because it is land named Moon, you see, and it exiles itself. And when it exiles itself, the leave the play trigger happens, and you return it to the battlefield. And so when you do that, it comes back as a clone, as a regular clone this time. It copies Princess Yue. It comes back as a moon, which copies a Newt, and you repeat this infinite times for infinite lanefall triggers. You're doing this infinite times for infinite lanefall triggers. And if you have like a Rune Crab on the battlefield, then it's infinite mill against all your opponents. Do you see how silly this deck is? Do you see how dumb this deck is? It's great. I love it. I love it to death. It is so silly. So yeah, that's the list. It's a clone deck. It can do some very powerful things if your opponents are playing powerful cards, because the cards in RR99 are not that powerful, I would say. But if our opponents have very powerful things and we could clone it for 4 mana, that could actually be quite powerful for us. But by itself, this deck not the strongest. Not the strongest. This is a very, very solid bracket 2 silly deck. It's also highly reliant on our commander sticking around if we want to do moon shenanigans, and she's a 3/2. She dies very easily, and keeping her as a land is not ideal unless you have ways of bouncing lands back to your hand, and the deck does have ways of bouncing back to the hand, so you can kind of get around the command text that way. But yeah, it's easily disruptible. The deck is rather slow, and the cards within it are not super amazing, but it just has so many silly synergies. If you look at the deck list, you'll be like, oh, why is this here? And the reason is because when it's a moon, it gets 10 times better, baby. It's just silly. I love this deck. I love this deck so much. It's my go-to favorite bracket 2 list. Definitely not bracket 3, though. If you're looking for a powerful deck, do not play Princess Yue. There's some other ones you should play, like Ashling or whatever, or Garnet, or like anything else, basically. Princess, if you want just a silly bracket 2 deck that people will be like, huh, how does that work? and the answer is always layers, then play Princess Yue. I love it. I love it so much. Speaking of decks I love this one too. This is Renma Creaking Nest. This is basically everybody gets birds. Those birds must attack, and we're going to have a good time, not a slow time, a fast time. It's fast, it's furious, it's birds, and it's a fun time for the table, I would say. So Renma Creaking Nest is a 5-mana Golgari deck. It has Menace Reach. It's a 5/5 Scarecrow, and when it enters and whenever you play a card with 2 or more card types, each player gets a tapped 2/2 Blackbird creature token with flying. The tokens are goaded for the rest of the game. So this deck is all about playing cards with 2 or more card types, giving everybody birds, including yourself and your opponents. They're all goaded. They're all entering tapped, so they can't block each other unless people have ways of untapping them or whatever. And they're all just smacking each other forever for the rest of the game. It's great. Everybody gets birds. Everybody's hitting each other. Game goes fast. It's fun times. So the deck is filled with cards with 2 or more card types. It's very artifact heavy because a lot of the cheap, good cards that have multiple card types are artifacts. So Dark Musk Bridge, for example, we play a land that's an artifact land. Everybody gets a bird. Shigeki Juke Visionary is one of the options that aren't artifacts. It's just good. It's ramp. It's also mass recursion later on in the game. It makes birds. Haywire Might, just really good spot removal. It makes birds. All good stuff. And because, like I said, most of these cards that have multiple card types are artifacts, we do have some artifact supports to just make the deck a little bit stronger through synergies. Foundry Inspector is really, really good ramp here, and it makes birds. Technomancer gets back a bunch of artifact creatures. We have a lot of artifact creatures. Also, Red Maw's an artifact creature. It makes birds. Demonic Junker doesn't make birds, but you can usually cast this for like 1 mana, and everybody has to lose a creature, and that's very sweet. It becomes just a really big creature. It doesn't make a bird by itself, but it's fantastic in an artifact-heavy deck. And then we get to the silly things. So to win the game, usually the birds are going to win the game, right? Everybody's hitting each other. Life totals are going down. Birds are birding it up. But we have some cool payoffs once there's a critical mass of birds, and we wanna have some fun. Pygmy Kavu, my favorite card in the entire deck. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card for each black creature your opponents control. All the birds are black. So if there's like everybody has 5 birds, oops, I draw 15 cards for 4 mana with a card I bet you 99% of the people watching this have never heard ever existed. Pygmy Kavu. My God. Another card nobody has ever heard or will ever see in Commander outside of here. Wingstorm. It deals X damage to each player, where X is twice the number of creatures with flying that player controls. It's burn for everybody. If everybody has like 5 birds, that's 10 to each person. But you know what? If we sacrifice our birds, or we're like birdless for whatever reason, we could deal damage when our opponents won't, or if we're just at the highest life total, right? All the creatures are goaded, so we're probably going to be at the highest life total anyway. Wingstorm is a funny way to finish the game. Cranial Plater, again, we're like very artifact heavy. We just slap the plating onto a random bird and hits somebody for like 10 in the air with a bird. It's funny. The deck is great. I don't know if it's great, like as in powerful, but it's super, super fun. The main downside of this deck is, first and foremost, it's an artifact deck. So if you get Farewelled, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot. Just like any mass artifact removal is going to make you feel like sad times. And the other thing is that it's heavily reliant on our commander to do the fun things, and our commander's 5 mana. So if he dies a couple times, it's going to be a little bit awkward. That said, though, it's still an artifact deck. It's still doing nonsense. You know, you can run a fully functioning artifact Golgari deck without the commander. But obviously, the deck is all about the commander and doing bird things. So being a 5-drop, no inherent protection from removal does make it a little bit dicey if people are running a lot of removal and killing him very efficiently. And they should. By the way, the birds kill people very fast. The other thing I forgot to mention. I don't know if you see it on screen. It's Massacre Worm. Massacre Worm is hilarious in this deck. All the birds are 2/2s, and we're giving a bunch of 2/2s to everybody. So Massacre Worm comes down. Boom, all the birds die, and all the opponents lose 2 life for each bird that dies and everything else that died. This deck is so fun. This deck is fun. I don't have a paper copy of this deck, but I have played against it a few times, and every single time it's just fun for the table. It's a fun deck. I like it very much. It's only $40 too. It's $5 less. We'll see how much it is in a couple months from now, but it's a fun one. This one is definitely a bracket 2, though. It's not doing anything super spooky. It's not like a very fast deck or anything like that. It's just a fun vibes deck, I would say. Solid bracket 2. I wouldn't say bracket 3. It's just like, it's fun at bracket 2 for more chill tables. Okay, the next one we got is another very fun one. It's Roxanne Starfall Savant. It's basically Gruel meatballs. We're just throwing a bunch of meteorites at people's faces, making a bunch of mana, and then throwing more meteorites at people's faces and just burning them down. It's like Gruel burn, Gruel meatballs. So Roxanne, it's a 5-drop. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you create a tapped colorless artifact token named Meteorite that says when it enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target, and it can tap to add 1 mana of any color. And whenever you tap an artifact token for mana, add 1 mana of any type that artifact token produced. So artifact tokens just tap for double mana. That's like your Meteorites tap for double. By the way, so they all tap for 2 instead of 1 with Roxanne on the battlefield. Your treasures, when you're sacrificing your treasures, they tap for double. And that's basically the 2 that are the most obvious. But yeah, so Roxanne's entering, she's making a bunch of meteorites, she's burning, she's shocking things, and she's making a bunch of mana in the process. Very Gruel, Burny, Smash. So the ways that we're going to be taking advantage of Roxanne, first and foremost, we want to give her haste. Dowsing the Vice is an MVP here. It gives Roxanne haste, so she enters, she makes a meteorite, she can melee attack, she can make another meteorite. Also, all the meteorites are artifacts, so this thing can flip over very quickly into a land that does even more damage. Panharmonicon is $6, but it's a staple in this deck because whenever Roxanne is entering, she makes 2 meteorites when she enters, and whenever a meteorite enters, it deals 2 damage 2 times instead of just 1. So it's 4 damage total per meteorite entering, which is super fun. And then we have a bunch of ways of copying our meteorites, like City of Death. City of Death, the first chapter just makes the treasure tokens. But after that, there's 5 more chapters of just copying meteorites. And every single time a meteorite shows up, boom, that's another 2 damage to somebody's face or somebody's creature, whatever. It's super fun for 3 mana. Okay, so yeah, it's a burn deck, so we have some burn payoffs as well. Virtue of Courage draws us a bunch of cards. Magmatic Galleon, whenever we're doing excess damage, we're also making treasures, and by the way, those treasures make 2 mana instead of just 1 with Roxanne. And Mechanized Warfare, whenever Roxanne or red creatures or meteorites are dealing damage, it's doing an extra damage now too. So the meteorites are doing lightning bolts instead of shocks now, which is very fun. Then, to finish the game, we have some fun ones. For the common good, we just copy our meteorites a bajillion times. Everybody takes a bajillion damage and dies. Same thing with Second Harvest, but we could do this at instant speed as well. So if we have like 10 meteorites, we get 10 more. And that's 20 damage across the board to everybody. And then extra combats like Last Night Together. That's more meteorites. That's more damage with Roxanne. And Last Night is actually especially good because it gives Roxanne Vigilance, Indestructible, and Haste, which is quite nice. So she doesn't have to worry about dying. And she can attack immediately. And she can block. So that's super fun. This deck is fun. It's very, very consistent because as long as the meteorites are around, if Roxanne dies, the meteorites help pay for the mana costs, kind of like the Golos effect. It does a lot of damage. Burn is really fun, and it's just a fun one. I think its main weakness is just if the meteorites all die. You know, like if you do a board wipe and you get rid of the artifact and Roxanne, then that slows down the deck a lot. But typically speaking, you see like if somebody like wipes the board or kills Roxanne, that's actually not a big deal. And then you just recast Roxanne with all the meteorites you have laying around. And the deck goes out of control pretty quickly too. Like it ramps into Roxanne, and then Roxanne is ramp, plus also picks off a bunch of creatures all the time. It's mixing in removal with ramp, and that's the win condition. And it's very fun. It's very good. I would say probably a bracket 3, possibly bracket 2. Depending on how many farewells your opponents play against you, I guess. Next, we have a fun Convoke deck. It's Saint Treft and Rem Carolus. It's Jeskai. Tap matters, Convoke matters, basically. Basically, it says whenever it becomes tapped, you create a 1/1 red human creature token. If it's the first time this ability resolves this turn. If it's the second time, you make a 1/1 blue spirit token flying, and if it's a third time, oh baby, you get a 4/4 white angel creature token flying. And whenever you cast a spell that has Convoke, untap, Saint Trapped, and Rem Careless. So basically, you cast a bunch of Convoke spells. Each time you're convoking with Rem Careless, you make another token, and you untap Careless, and you can use him and the token you just made to convoke another thing, and you can do that up to 3 times per turn to get 3 tokens per turn with Rem Careless. It's quite good. It's quite a lot of value. So he's a huge token generator, and he just gives a huge mana discount to all your convoke spells because you can keep using him as fuel. So the deck is, first and foremost, using a lot of Convoke spells. Wildfire Awakener puts a bunch of creatures on the battlefield and has Convoke, and those things work really well with Convoke because then they deal damage to players when they're being used as fuel. We have other spells like Artistic Refusal. It's a counter spell, but it also draws a little bit of cards. And then we also have cards that require creatures to be tapped to fuel it, but aren't necessarily Convoke, like Shared Discovery. You know, we're a Go Wide Tokens deck. We're popping out creatures. We tap 4 of them. For 1 mana, we draw 3 cards. Heck yeah, I love it. And then we have a bunch of creatures that also want to be tapped. Tween Law draws us a card when it's tapped and grows. Gran elutes for 1 mana. Stony Schoolmaster makes 1/1s when it gets tapped. And then, when we really want to have some fun, Jeskai Ascendancy, whenever we're casting our non-creature spells, we're untapping all our creatures so we can tap them for more good stuff. Intruder Alarm, whenever we're making tokens, we untap all our creatures to tap them for more stuff. And Kazla, it has Convoke, and then when we're convoking, we're drawing cards, and we have a big ol' flying beater. It's good stuff. Deck is super fun. I think it's a pretty fair deck because, you know, like, it is a go-wide deck. It is a momentum-based deck, so board wipes are kind of sad times for it. Obviously, I put in some indestructible, some ways of surviving board wipes, but you know, if you get caught at a bad spot, it's going to take a little bit of time to rebuild. So I would say it's bracket 2, possibly bracket 3 deck, but I think it's safest at bracket 2, and if it's too strong there, then put in bracket 3, I guess. All right, now we come to another baby of mine. This is another one that I made a paper version that added to my collection. Seki Seasons Guide. This is definitely a bracket 2 deck, not a bracket 3 deck, because oh boy, is it an old janky Kamigawa legend that's 8 mana in the command zone. Yes, sirree. 8 mana in the command zone. It has no immediate impact on the game, and it has no built-in removal protection. Well, I guess it can recur itself, but it's very hard to do so. Seki Seasons Guide. It's 8 mana, mono green. It enters the battlefield with 8 +1/+1 counters on it. If damage would be dealt to Seki, prevent the damage, remove that many counters from Seki, and put that many 1/1 Color Spirit creature tokens into play. And you can sacrifice 8 spirits, return Seki from your graveyard to play. This is basically mono green aristocrats / mono green +1/+1 counters matters. It's not a spirit deck. But it can make a lot of spirits by fighting with Seki. There's a lot of fight spells in this deck too. I love this deck because I love old original Kamigawa legends. They're very janky, but they have so much character to them. It's not a very good commander, but it has some infinite combos, and I tried to make the 99 as optimal as possible to kind of compensate for the fact that the commander is kind of garbage, but I love him anyway. So the main thing of the deck is aristocrats. We have a bunch of cards here that want to be sacrificed for value. Dinosaur Egg, Discovers, Primal Druid, and Viridian Emissary die, and they ramp you when they die. And then we have some cool sacrifice outlights for our sacrifice fodder, like Evolutionary Leap. We sacrifice it, we get a new creature. Greater Good, we draw a bunch of cards. Primal Growth, we get to ramp 2 instead of just ramping 1. And then we also have a Counters Matters theme that kind of weaves together with the aristocrats. So Renata and Bloodsport Thrynex are ways of getting counters on all our creatures. And then we have cards like Meltstrider Eulogist. When creatures with counters on them die, we get to draw cards. So we're turning our sacrifice into counter stuff, bigger creatures, but then when they die, they draw us cards. That's super good. Now, to win the game and justify having Seki in the command zone, we do have some infinite combos. They're janky. They're 4 cards. They could be 3 cards if you increase the budget and swap Spawning Pit with Blasting Station. But as is, it's 4 cards to actually win the game on the spot. Seki Season Guide. One of the Kami enchanting another creature that isn't Seki. That's important. Spawning Pit and Glaring Fleshraker. Those are the 4 cards you need for this instance of the combo. So you have Seki, you have another creature out that has one of the Kami enchanted on it. Like, for example, you can enchant the Glaring Fleshraker, I guess. You sacrifice Seki to the Spawning Pit, as long as Seki is at 8 power or higher. One of the Kami will make then 8 1/1 spirit creature tokens when Seki dies, and then you sacrifice the 8 spirits to Seki's ability to return back to the battlefield. You can do this infinite times, and Glaring Fleshraker will deal infinite damage to your opponents. Yes, it's 4 cards. It's a little bit convoluted, but it does kill people on the spot, and you use an old 8-mana commander from original Kamigawa, which I think is very funny. There's some other versions of the combo in the deck too. I think they're all 4 cards in order to win the game immediately. Alternatively, if you increase the budget, if you swap out Spawning Pit with like Altar of Dementia or like Blasting Station or something like that, you can drop like the Glaring Fleshraker and you can do 3-card combo variations of this. But yeah, the deck in its current form is 4-card combos. I love this deck because it's so novel. First of all, who plays Seki? It's a silly guy, but I love him. And he has some really cool potential. Like, even without the combos, like just having a bunch of fight spells with Seki is very, very humorous because like obviously Seki won't die and you generate a bunch of spirits in the process, which is very funny. And obviously if you increase the budget, he can do more and more silly things. And also just going mono green aristocrats is kind of novel to me. Typically you see that in black-based decks or white-based decks, but not like mono green. Mono green aristocrats is weird. So I love that it's weird. I love that it's using an unloved commander. That's like my favorite thing, is finding like old commanders that weren't meant for the commander format and building cool decks around them, build decks that other people haven't seen and being like, oh, that's neat. And Seki really checks that box for me. Even my upgraded version, though, is definitely like bracket 2. It's not very fast. This one is also definitely a bracket 2. It's one of the weaker decks from this video, but it is also my favorite one, at least of the green decks. Another deck I love, too, is Sephiroth Fallen Hero. Sephiroth. It's not the mono black one. It's actually the Boros one that nobody plays. But I think it's actually a really good one. So this is a 5-mana Boros creature. It's a 7/5, and it says whenever it attacks, you may put a cell counter on target creature. Until end of turn, each modified creature you control has base power and toughness 7/5. And you can pay 3 mana, sacrifice a modified creature, return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So what Sephiroth does is basically it turns all your creatures into base power 7/5s as long as they're modified. Sephiroth modifies them 1 at a time per attack, but like if they have auras on them, equipments on them, +1/+1 counters on them, whatever, he turns them all into 7/5s, which is quite a nice base power and toughness boost. And then also he kind of circumvents the command tax a little bit by having a way to not go back to the command zone. Like if you just sacrifice a modified creature for 3 mana, he comes back. He's tapped. But like, that's a much cheaper than paying 7 mana to get him back, especially in Boros colors. So I really like that. I like his built-in resiliency, and I like his really unique ability of antheming up all your creatures. So the main idea of this deck is basically run a bunch of cards, a bunch of creatures that scale very well with power boosts. Vincent, for example, when his power is 7 or greater, he deals his damage to everybody. And also, by the way, he puts counters on himself too, which is quite nice. Krenko is one of the best creatures in the deck because if you attack with him properly, you can have Sephiroth turn him into a 7/5 if he already has a counter on him. Then Krenko will put a counter on himself and then poop out at least 8 red goblin creature tokens, which is hilariously strong for a 3-drop. And then also stuff like Swiftblade Vindicator, turning it into a 7/5 double strike Vigilance Trampler means that it's 14 damage coming at some poor souls away for just a 2-drop. I love it. And then also because the most efficient way of getting creatures modified is just putting counters on them. We have a lot of ways of adding counters to everything. Luminarch Aspirant, Showdown of Skalds, Kamiya Celebration. A lot of these cards also work with Impulse Draw. So you'll see like Showdown of Skalds impulse draws for us. Kami of Celebration, impulse draws for us. So there's a lot of overlap between impulse draw and putting counters on things. And we're going to weave into that into our card draw as well. So like Aranya shows up again because she mixes together impulse draw and counters. And then the other thing, the most powerful thing actually in the entire deck is we get to run a bunch of sweepers that deal 4 or less damage to all creatures on the battlefield. And they're basically one-sided. As long as we attacked first with Sephiroth, all our creatures are now 7/5s. We can cast Storm's Wrath, deal 4 damage to each creature. None of our creatures are going to die, but all our opponents' smaller creatures are going to die. Same thing with Extinguisher's Battleship. And there's quite a few of them. So basically, all our opponents' creatures that are relatively small die, and as long as we're attacking with our modified creatures, all of our creatures are going to live. So yeah, I love this deck too. It feels like a bracket 2 deck, possibly a bracket 3 deck. I feel like it's more disruptible than a typical bracket 3, and less explosive, but it can do some very nutty things as well. I think it's a very solid bracket 2, possibly bracket 3. But it's a very, very fun one and fairly unique, I would say. All right, here's one with a lot of explosive potential. This is Shilgengar, Sire of Famine. It's essentially Angel Aristocrats. And I know a lot of people say, oh, that's not a real Angel deck, but I think it's a very, very cool Angel deck. Like, sure, there's a demon on the throne sacrificing the angels for value, so maybe you don't like the lore implications of that, the flavor implications, but I think that makes angels even more badass. So this is an Elder Demon, flying 6/6. It's actually the person who tricked Edgar Markov or influenced Edgar Markov into doing vampirism on Innistrad. So kudos to Shilgengar for making Innistrad more interesting. So he's a 6/6 flyer. Sacrifice another creature, you create a blood token. If you sacrifice an angel this way, create a number of blood tokens equal to its toughness instead. Ooh la la. Then you can pay 3 hybrid Orzhov, sacrifice 6 blood tokens, return each creature a card from your graveyard to the battlefield with finality counter on it. Those creatures are vampires in addition to the other types. 3 mana, mass reanimate for everything in your graveyard. That's actually insane. And you could do that like basically immediately because its sacrifice ability is free and instant speed. And if you sacrifice a single angel with 6 or more toughness, boom, you could just pay 3 mana, boom, mass reanimation at instant speed. Woof, woof. The power potential here is amazing, and I don't see anybody hyped about this card. I don't know why. So yeah, this is a Orzhov Aristocrats Angel deck. We're doing some silly things. Some of the best angels that we want with Shilgengar are like warp ones, like Esteli Reclaimer and Starfield Shepherd. Both of these, you warp them in, you get some immediate value, then you can immediately sacrifice them before they get exiled, and get some blood tokens that way. Angel of the Ruins is another thing that works really well in this deck because typically you don't actually cast it. You just cycle it away early on. Maybe you can hard cast it later on in the game, but you can like just cycle it and reanimate it later. And it's very sweet, and it has a little flexibility. It has a good ETB removal. I love it. And when we're making a bunch of blood tokens, we can use them various ways. Inspiring Statuary turns all those blood tokens into basically mana rocks because we don't really run that many artifacts outside of, like this. So the blood tokens basically cast everything in our deck. Voldarian Bloodcaster, whenever we're making a blood token, we make basically an extra blood token when we're sacrificing to Shilgengar, so it makes it easier to get to mass reanimation. And then one of my favorite tech cards in the deck is Rampage of the Valkyries. It's basically a Grave Pact for angels. It comes onto the battlefield with a 4/4 angel, which you can sacrifice. And then whenever your angels are dying, each opponent has to sacrifice a creature too, which is just bananas. So much value on a 5-drop. Now, I know a lot of people are put off by the fact that, all the things get reanimated by finality counters, but fret not. First of all, not much of a drawback. The amount of power we're getting out of that, it's more than fair that they get finality counters on them, and they're probably going to die before those finality counters become an issue. But second of all, we can actually turn the finality counters into a benefit for us. So first of all, we have cards like Scholar of New Horizons, where we can remove finality counters in order to ramp, which is bananas. Reese to Evermore is actually so cool in this deck too, because we could give a creature persist before sacrificing Shilgengar, and then later on, we could remove finality counters with Reese's ability too. And whenever we're doing blood shenanigans stuff, we're making a bunch of blood tokens, we're sacrificing the blood tokens, we're draining the heck out of our opponents with Mirkwood bats. I love it. So this deck is actually surprisingly strong. Like, angels are relatively slow. That's kind of their gimmick. And also, mono white angels are very expensive to make because they focus on life gain. And life gain is one of the most casual, beloved archetypes in the game. And casuals love life gain. So anything related to life gain is like $50 bajillion. So it's really hard to make a decent angel deck on a budget. And Shilgengar not only adds a lot of speed, explosive potential to angels, but also does it in an incredibly budget-friendly way. Like, it's much more mana efficient to just sacrifice, discard your angels, put all the angels in the bin, and then mass reanimate them and not actually spend mana to cast them, actually. And that's what Shilgengar offers you. So as long as you're okay with a demon leading your beautiful, pristine angel army, Shilgengar is right there, and he's doing a badass job of it. All right, next we got Sokka, His Eyes Uncovered. This is a Jeskai Allies deck that is basically all about spell slinging. It's all about non-creature spells. You put out a bunch of 1/1 allies just with Sokka himself, and he even grows them because they all have menace and prowess. So the more spells you're casting in a single turn, the bigger these allies get, and the more allies you get. So he's like a one-man army in a can. You just cast a bunch of non-creature spells. The more, the better. And you just poop out a bunch of allies and pump them a little bit, and you kind of win the game after that. So, what are we going to be doing? We're casting instant sorceries, baby. I know. Tomer, you like a lot of instant sorceries. Well, I can't help it if they're the best thing to do, especially on a budget. So, I'm focusing specifically, though, on spells that cast multiple spells, right? So, Baral's expertise, it casts one spell, you bounce a bunch of things that you want out of the way, but then, hey, you get to cast another spell for free from your hand. That's quite nice. Press Enemy is also quite cute. It's basically 2 Sokka triggers as well. You bounce something again that you don't like, a spell or non-land permanent, and then you get to cast another spell from your hand for free, hopefully, and that's 2 Sokka triggers. And then Search to Victory is quite nice too. You have something really big and fancy in the graveyard that you want to copy. You pump up your team, which Sokka already is a team in a can. And whenever you hit with your team, you get to cast the spell again and again and again. And Sokka triggers, more and more allies. It's super fun. We also have a little bit of an ally sub-theme. A lot of the allies kind of suck, but some of them are quite good, and they work very well if you're pumping out a bunch of allies for free, essentially. So like Wartime Protester, all those allies you're casting before combat, well, they got haste, they got counters on them, they can swing in immediately. That's super good. Murasa Pyromancer might be too weak. Who knows? But I had a soft spot for it. I wanted to throw in some more allies into the list. It's 6 mana, which is a lot, but at ETBs, if you have like 5 or so allies on the battlefield, bada bing, bada boom, you blow up a creature, and then every single time another ally is entering, you blow up basically every single creature your opponents have on their side of the battlefield. Lantern Scout, just giving all your allies lifelink, and then swinging with Sokka and your team. Well, you're going to gain like 15 plus life. It's kind of enormous. It doesn't scale up like the more triggers don't do anything extra, but like, it's more lifelink because all the creatures have prowess and whatnot. But yeah, it's a huge life gain swing. And then to kind of like put both ideas together, Jeskai Ascendancy pumps up the team, untaps them, and, loots and stuff. It's really good. Rhymefire Torque shows up again because, of course, it does. You're an allies deck. You're making a bunch of allies, and then you're going to get a bunch of tokens or charge counters on the Rhymefire Torque, and you're going to copy a bunch of spells very easily. And cards like Winnowing is just going to be amazing here, especially good with Jeskai Ascendancy, by the way. You can Invoke out Winnowing. You make everybody sacrifice a bunch of creatures. You sacrifice nothing because all your creatures are allies. And then, if you have Jeskai Ascendancy, you get to untap all the creatures you just used to Convoke out Winnowing. Very, very cool. This deck gets quite strong. If it gets going, that it's very, very hard to stop, and it's very explosive because, again, Sokka just knocks out so many allies, and not only that, but he gives them menace and he gives them prowess. So if Sokka is basically allowed to untap more than once, then it's probably lights out for somebody's face. So I would say this deck is probably bracket 3, just because Sokka really needs to be dealt with. Like, if you're not killing Sokka every single turn, then somebody's probably going to die. Maybe multiple people will die just because he has so much explosive potential. And the deck works very well on a budget too. There's a lot of interaction, a lot of card draw, and lots of ways of protecting the team as well. So yeah, I think the deck is very, very strong. It could be played at bracket 2, I guess, but I think it's probably best homed at bracket 3. Next up, we have another Voltron commander. I kind of like Voltron. I feel like that's less popular these days, so I kind of wanted to build a couple more Voltrons for the budget range. And this one is It Voltron? Exile Matters Voltron, Spider-Man 2099. It's a 2-drop, but it has like a weird restriction where you can't cast it during your first, second, or third turns, which is fine. Typically, you want to have your Voltron commander out a little bit later when you're ready to protect him. So taking the first 3 turns off to just like set up the board, set up your hand and stuff is fine. It's a 2/3 with double strike vigilance, which are great stats for a Voltron commander. Means you can deal double damage. And anytime you're giving him more power boost, you get double the value out of it. And vigilance means it's hard for people to attack into you. And then at the beginning of your end step, if you played a land or cast a spell from this turn from anywhere other than your hand, Spider-Man 2099 deals damage equal to his power to any target. So just casting Spider-Man from the command zone the first time means you're going to trigger it on the end step. But then it very much encourages you to cast like impulse draw spells and stuff, cascading stuff, to always trigger his end step trigger because it's just a lot of extra damage. Especially if you're pumping up his power, which you will, because it's Voltron. So the bread and butter of this deck is basically just Impulse Draw that also pumps up Spider-Man. Blazing Crescendo, Haste Magic, Tavern Brawler. These are all ways of basically cantripping, but like also casting from exile and pumping up Spider-Man at the same time. Like giving him 3 power means he's dealing 6 extra damage thanks to double strike. Haste is nice and whatnot too. And then you have that end step trigger too. So like if you pump up him with haste magic, he becomes a 5/4. He becomes a 5/4 double strike. You can smack somebody for 10. And then on the end step, you get to deal 10 damage to any target, which is kind of redonkulous. So yeah, these are really, really great cards in the deck. And then, because we're also an Impulse Draw style deck, we have a lot of Impulse Draw payoffs. Spider-Verse is very cute here. When we cast Spider-Man 2099 with this on the battlefield, we get 2 Spider-Mans, which is very funny. Interdimensional Web Watch is both ramp, but also Impulse Draw as well at ETBs. And Impending Flux, we've talked about Impending Flux a bunch of times because it's an amazing, criminally underrated card. It's just a one-sided board wipe / deals damage to people's faces. Amazing, must include in Impulse decks. Yeah, that's very straightforward. It's just like a lot of protection, card draw, ways of pumping up Spider-Man, and casting stuff from exile. Pretty much straightforward over here. But it's very effective. It's very effective. It shows up a lot in Brawl, but it's also just as good in multiplayer formats. I highly recommend it. I would say it's bracket 3. It can be a little bit oppressive, really hard to stop in bracket 2. And like if your opponents don't have a lot of cheap removal to stop Spider-Man, then he kind of steamrolls everybody. Also, every single turn, he's like just blowing up a person's best creature. That can be very frustrating at bracket 2. So I think he's a solid bracket 3. That's my opinion. Yeah, next one. Oh, okay. Speaking of annoying, repeatable removal that's hard to deal with. Hello, Servandum Sunstar Exemplar. 2 mana Orzhov, Vigilance Menace. Whenever another creature you control dies or is put into exile, you put a +1/+1 counter on Servandum and you gain 1 life. And when it dies or is put into exile while its power is 4 or greater, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. So the most popular way I see Servandum built is going Sacrifice. And I personally prefer Blink. So I built a Blink deck. And then a friend of mine asked me how you would build Servandum as Sacrifice. So I just rebuilt the deck as Sacrifice, also under $45. I'm going to show you the Blink version, but I'm going to have in the article, I'm going to have my Sacrifice version too. They're both very good. They both have their different strengths and weaknesses, but both of them, what they share in common basically is you're doing either a lot of Sacrifice stuff or a lot of Blinky stuff. Servandum will grow very, very big, and he will gain life in the process. He has Vigilance and Menace, so you can swing in with impunity, basically. Deal a lot of damage like that. And then whenever there's anything mildly threatening on the table, you either Sacrifice or Blink Servandum and then he will just blow up the annoying permanent, and you get him back over and over again by either reanimating him or blinking him. And you just keep doing that a billion times, and your opponents will hate you, but you're probably going to win the game very, very often. So oppressive is what I would call Servandem, even if you're going blink or you're going sacrifice. But I'm going to talk about the blink version. So the blink version, we have a lot of ways of, sure enough, blinking Servandem. Stuff like Charming Prince and blinking your other creatures too. Parting Gust, it either removal, or it could blink Servandem, or it could blink your other creatures. Senu is fantastic here too. I love this card. It's a pet favorite of mine. It blinks itself every single turn, and it comes back whenever you're attacking with a legendary creature like Servandem, which you can do every single time. So every single turn, essentially, you're scrying, you're gaining life, and you're also you're also growing Servandem at the same time, which is very fun. Then, because we're a blink deck, we have other things that really want to be blinked. Boreas Charger, you blink it, you ramp a bunch of planes. It's very fun. Redemption Choir, you get to reanimate another thing every single time you blink it. Ruthless Lawbringer, you get to sacrifice another thing every single time you blink it, and you destroy more permanents that way. And then we have lots of more blinks. Another round, amazing blink option. Blink all your creatures that have ETBs and Servandem, blow up a bunch of stuff, do a bunch of value things. Same thing with Lae'zel's Acrobatics. You can do that instant speed, potentially blink them all once or blink them all even twice. And then Storm of Souls is a great reanimation in this deck because you can reanimate everybody on a major discount. It's only 6 mana. They come back as 1/1s. Who cares? But also, they're still the creatures, right? So if you blink them, they come back as regular versions of themselves too. It's just a great card in this particular deck. So yeah, this is the blink version. I really like it. I think it's incredibly oppressive. I would maybe stray away from playing this often in bracket 2. It's probably better off at bracket 3, where blowing up everybody's stuff that is higher budget to you is probably correct to do. But yeah, it can be very strong. The sacrifice version is also very, very good, and it will be in the article section if you are interested in that version too. Next, we have Tanuk Memorial Ensign. This is Landfall Burn, and as someone who does not care for the Landfall archetype whatsoever, I have no interest in playing Landfall decks. This is the only one that I'm like, hell yeah, because it's burn, and it means that when you're doing Landfall stuff, your opponents will die, and I very much appreciate that. I very much appreciate that eventually, while your opponents are playing Solitaire, getting lands on the battlefield, and putting them in the graveyard and reanimating them over and over again. Eventually, it's over. It ends because Tanuk will burn them all out, and I very much appreciate that. So Tanuk is just a 3-drop. It's just a 3-drop. Whenever a land you control enters, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. But if it was a second time this ability resolved this turn, you also draw a card. So it's card draw, repeatable card draw, and repeatable burn whenever lands are entering. So the whole concept of this deck is basically trying to get 2 lands to enter the battlefield on as many turns as possible, both your turns and your opponent's turns. We have ways of, triggering the draw on our turn very easily. We play just like a Cabaretti Courtyard or any of the Evolving Wilds or whatever. We play a land, immediately sacrifice to get another land. That's 2 damage to nuke and immediately card draw. And then trickier, but definitely doable, is drawing cards on our opponent's turns. We have stuff like Colony Heart Expedition. We can sack it, ramp out 2 lands on an opponent's turn. And then same thing with Harrow and its variants. We sacrifice a land, ramp out 2 lands on an opponent's turn. All of those ways are just 2 more damage and 1 more card draw each time with Tanuk. And then some of the best cards with Tanuk is just like Keen Sense, Snake Umbra. You slap that on Tanuk. You ping every opponent for 1 damage, and then you draw a card for each opponent you damage. So if you have 3 opponents and you trigger Tanuk with Keen Sense or Snake Umbra on it, you draw 3 cards each time you're pinging somebody. That's going to be a hand refill very easily. Virtue of Courage also turns all that burn into card draw. Yeah, it's a little bit worse than the enchantments, but it is impulse draw, and it's quite nice. And then, because we are a burn deck, we also have burn support cards. Fear of Burning Alive, Chandra's Incinerator. These just say, like, when we're doing damage to our opponents, we also do that much damage to our opponent's creatures. Our opponent's creatures are going to die. It's great. And then we also have ways of increasing the damage output too. Aether Revolt works really well with all these like lands that are sacrificing themselves, Evolving Wilds and stuff, because that means we can trigger Revolt very easily. And now we're doing 3 damage per trigger with Tanuk instead of just 1, which is actually insane. And then we also are a landfall deck, so we have a bunch of landfall payoffs. Avenger of Zendikar, obviously. Sabotender is just another pinger like Tanuki. Chocobo Racetrack is a great token generator, and those tokens get really, really big too as you keep doing more landfall stuff. And yeah, that's basically the deck. It's a burn deck, it's a landfall deck. You mix the two together, you have a fun time, baby. It's very cheap, it's very budget friendly, and it's incredibly effective. I think the deck's major weakness is that, like, if you keep killing Tanuki over and over again, the deck kind of loses a bit of steam because Tanuki is just such a great card draw engine, such a great burn engine, that if you keep killing him over and over, that's a little bit annoying. That slows down the deck a lot. On the other hand, though, this is a landfall deck, and it's a 3-drop commander, so you can recast him a lot of times, and it's not going to be a problem. It's just going to slow down the deck. It's not going to shut down the deck, if that makes sense. And yeah, that's basically it. It's a landfall deck. You know landfall decks, and you know burn decks. Yeah. I think it's like either bracket 2, bracket 3. Like, it has ways of doing like 20 plus damage in a single turn. Not as many ways if you had infinite budget, but there are a lot of ways of just being like, hey, I just get all the lands in my graveyard back onto the battlefield immediately. Are you dead? Yeah, probably. So that can happen, but how often will that happen? I don't know. So let's say bracket 2, and if it's too strong, bracket 3. This deck was made because the rest of the Goldfish crew said this card is trash, and I'm here to tell you, friends, that not only is it not trash, it's also very fun on a budget. It's Tazri, Stalwart Survivor. It's a 5-color activated abilities on your creature's control matters. How do I say this properly? I don't know. It's getting very late, and I've been recording for like 3 hours. It's activated ability 5-color matters. No, you know what I'm saying. I don't know. My brain's turning off. Let me just read the card. It's a white creature, 3-drop, but it has Woobrick as its color identity, thanks to its activated ability. But it says each creature you control has tap, add 1 mana of any of this creature's colors. Spend this mana only to activate an ability of a creature. Activate only if this creature has another activated ability. And you can pay Woobrick, tap it, mill 5 cards, put all creature cards with activated abilities that aren't mana abilities from among the mill cards into your hands. And I tossed in a companion because how often do you get to do that? Zirda the Dawnwaker. Zirda says abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1 mana, and you can pay 1, tap it. Target creature can't block this turn. And the companion restriction is each permanent card in your starting deck has an active ability, which isn't actually that hard to do. I was basically like 6 cards of the way to having the companion slot in, so I didn't really have to sacrifice too much to get it as a companion, and it's very much worth it because how often do you get to actually have a companion in one of your decks? That's super cool. So Tazri is actually quite strong. So first and foremost, she acts as basically all your creatures become mana dorks. They have the restriction they can only be used to activate abilities, but all of them have activated abilities anyway. Zirda was taking care of that. And then her own activated ability is actually incredibly strong. Wooburg, tap, mill 5, and all those creatures that have active abilities will go into your hand. So it's just a repeatable card refill, and your other creatures can help pay for that cost, right? Because they can all tap for mana for Tazri's ability. So she's mana advantage for you, and she's like this insanely good card advantage engine for you too, all for 3 mana, and she gives you access to all 5 colors. And then Zirda on top of that is going to be really, really fun and enable some combos to win the game, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So this deck is almost entirely composed of creatures that have activated abilities. We have creatures that basically do everything for us. Insidious Fungus is ramp / disenchant. Sky Serpent Seeker is a good blocker that eventually ramps us. Order of the White Clay is really cool recursion that works very well with Tazri, by the way. You can tap it to act as a mana dork, and then that allows it to untap itself and recur things without actually having to attack or whatever. Very cool. Love it. And then we have a lot of really cool support pieces for this archetype that I never really considered outside of, like Kenrith the Returned King. And it's really cool to see them actually being playable. So we got Biomancer's Familiar, which is obviously everybody knows that if you're a Kenrith player, activate abilities cost 2 less to activate. That's great. That enables a lot of silly things. But Dynahair, I totally forgot existed as a card. It allows you to copy activated abilities if you spend 4 or more mana on them, like say, I don't know, Tazri, so we get to double the value out of that, and it gives all the activated ability things like haste and whatnot. Oh my god, my brain's turning off, I'm so sorry. And then Redshift is super cool too. Hello. It taps for a lot of mana, and you can spend it for activated abilities, and then the Exhaust is just put all the permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Love that. That's like a Galta type thing for activated ability decks. Yeah, that's super fun. And then to win the game, we actually have a couple different combo variants. We have Tazri, Stalwart, Survivor. Then any way of lowering the mana cost of activated abilities. So Zerda is one of the ways of doing that. We saw Biomancer's Familiar. There's a couple different ones that do that. So if you have Tazri, any of the mana discounters, and then you use either Naxxal Clique or there's another card in the deck, Hate Flare, that also wins the game. But in the case of Naxxal Clique, if you have these 3 cards on the battlefield, you can tap Naxxal Clique for blue mana to activate its own untap ability, and it only costs 1 blue thanks to Zerda making that mana discount on its activated ability. So you tap it for blue, you immediately spend that blue to untap it, and target opponent removes the top card of their library from the game. And then you just keep doing that over and over again. You tap it again for blue, exile everybody's libraries, do it infinite times, you win the game, huzzah. And you can also do it with Hate Flare, where you just deal infinite damage to your opponents, but Naxxal Clique is the better one. So yeah, there's a lot of variations of this combo in the deck, and it just infinite wins, and it's very easy. And 2 of the 3 pieces of the combo are both in the command zone and the companion zone, which, yeah, I mean, is very good. Adds a lot of consistency to the deck. So yeah, this deck is actually pretty sweet. It's actually pretty cool. And I'm just saying that the MTG Goldfish crew, the rest of them are wrong, and this card is actually sweet, and it's neat. And people were saying it's bad, but look at me. It's not only is it sweet and good, but it's also good on a budget. Like, it's a 5-color deck on a budget. Hello. So yeah, I think this one's a very, very unique deck. Not a lot of people are playing it, and that's a shame because it's really cool. What would I say? Is it bracket 2 or bracket 3? I would say it's bracket 3 just because of its combo potential, can win out of nowhere very easily. But it is very disruptible. It does require a lot of creatures on the board to do things. And it is, I wouldn't say it's slow, but it does get hurt by board wipes a lot. So if you're in a very board wipe heavy deck, or environment, then probably adjust the deck a little bit more to have a little bit more indestructibility, a little bit more protection, a little bit more counter spells, I guess. But if you're allowed like a couple turns of grace period, you can probably just win the game out of nowhere. So I think it's a bracket 3 just because the combos are so effective, and 2 of the 3 pieces are already available to you from the start of the game, which I think is kind of ridiculous. So yeah, really cool deck. I love it. All right, another deck that I love, and I actually have a paper version of this deck, and I actually made a budget version based on my paper version, Tetsun Gnome Champion. It's just Sky artifacts, but it's specifically caring about double-faced artifacts. You want to play double-faced artifacts, and when you do, you get to mill, and you get to pull one of those artifact milled this way into your hands. You do that a bunch of times for a lot of card advantage, filling up your graveyard. Eventually, you flip over Tetsun, and you have a 6/6 Vigilance Trampler that whenever it's attacking or enters the battlefield, you make some 1/1 gnomes, and you also get to transform one of your double-faced artifacts for free, which is really, really strong, really good. The front side is all about this card advantage, plus filling up your graveyard, and then the back side, eventually, when you get to that, is to start to flip all these double-faced artifacts that you were playing earlier to generate card advantage from. Really, really good 1-2 punch. So the type of things we're going to be doing with Tetsun, the type of double-faced artifacts we're going to be doing to trigger the front face. Dowsing Device, absolutely amazing here. Thousand Moon Smithy, love to see it. But actually the best one is actually not even a double-faced artifact. It's Chromehost Seed Shark. Whenever we're casting a non-creature spell, which is the vast majority of cards in this deck, we get to incubate X. And those incubator tokens are double-faced artifacts. So despite Host She Shark not being an artifact itself, every single time you cast a non-creature artifact, you incubate, and when you incubate, you trigger Tetsun, and you get to draw a card, and you get to mill. Kind of great. Well, you don't get to draw a card. You get to mill, and then hopefully draw a card. But there's like 50 artifacts in the deck, so you almost always draw, basically. But yeah, crazy good here. Then when we get to the backside of Tetsun, there's some really specific artifact, like all the artifacts that are double face obviously are great if you flip them over for free with Tetsun's backside. But there's two in particular that are like, oh my god, they just take this deck to 11 out of nowhere. Matsalanti, the Great Door, and Azor's Gateway. Both of them, if you flip them up for free with Tetsun's backside, you get a land that basically taps for a bajillion mana. The core taps for mana equals the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, which again, you're self-milling a ton with the front side of Tetsun, so it's going to be a lot. And then Sanctum of the Sun taps for mana equal to your life total, which is going to be like 20 plus easily. So yeah, you're pretty much good for mana for the rest of the game if you manage to flip either of these two, which is great. Then to win the game, we're doing artifact stuff. So we have a bunch of non-creature artifacts. We could turn them all into big beaters with Depth Shaker Titan and Cyberdrive Awakener. And also, since we're doing all this self-milling stuff, Wake the Past and other mass artifact reanimations are just so god mode here because it's like we take everything in our graveyard, the 20 plus cards, and we just shove them on the battlefield and like, boom, we're having a great time. So yeah, that's how we end the game. So yeah, this deck is really fun. It's artifacts meets graveyards meets double-faced artifacts, and it gets out of control really fast. The artifact count is 48, so I was a little bit off, but 48, that's a very high hit rate. Very high hit rate for Tetsun. You're almost always going to draw a card when you mill 3, and it's super fun. Speaking of fun, though, this is another one that I'm like, oh, I really want to put this in my paper collection. It's the Ancient one. It's a 2-mana Dimir 8/8. But it has a little bit of a catch, obviously, a 2-mana 8/8. It has Descend 8. It can't attack or block unless there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard. But it also has an activate ability. You could pay 4 mana, draw a card, then discard a card. When you discard a card this way, target player mills cards equal to its mana value. So the idea of this deck is basically it's a self-mill deck, and it does weird things with having a really high power commander that's very cheap and reliable. And it also does weird things with mill, though we're going to get to a little bit later. You might guess what it is, because I really like this strategy a lot. But okay, so the main thing that I really like about this deck is it's a secret Convergence of Dominion deck, which is a pet card of mine that I absolutely love. It says, as long as you control your commander, activate abilities of cards in your graveyard cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that mana's activation cost to less than 1 mana. So, and it also gets to mill you 3 cards too. So this deck is all about milling. Obviously, if you want to attack or block you need to mill your deck yourself anyway for the Ancient one to start swinging in there. It's only a 2-drop. The commander is only a 2-drop, so it's very reliable. You can recast them a bunch of times. So Convergence of Dominion is very reliable. So all of a sudden, the active abilities in your graveyard are going to be cheaper to cast, and we're a self-mill deck, so match made in heaven, basically. So we have a bunch of cards here that have really good activated abilities. Falcon, Airship Restored, can reanimate itself with its activated ability, and then you can use it to sacrifice it to reanimate other creatures. We have Encore creatures like Subterfuge that have these really powerful abilities. Now all of them cost 2 less to cast. Absolutely love it. And then we have a bunch of cards that do the self-milling for us. So the Warring Triad, it mills us while ramping us. And then eventually, when we have enough cards in our graveyard, it turns into a 5/5 Flying Trample Haste. Everflowing Well, we mill 2, we draw 2. And then once we have enough cards in the graveyard, we flip it into a land. It's awesome. Case of the Shifting Visage. It's always surveilling 1, so it's putting stuff in our graveyard, and then when we have 15 or more cards, boom, every single time we're casting a non-legendary creature spell, we get to copy it. So much value for 3 mana. Love it. And then we also have high power matters. We have a lot of creatures, including the Ancient one, that have incredibly high power. Some of them are like based on the number of creatures in all graveyards and stuff. They get absurdly large. So stuff like Spell Rupture is amazing because if we have our commander out, this is just a 2-mana counter spell, but very budget, and it's only one generic and blue, so it's really easy to cast. Essence Harvest for 3 mana. We just drain somebody for 8, as long as we have our commander out or something even bigger. Altar of the Retro, we can always sacrifice our commander or bigger creatures to draw 8 cards and mill 8 cards for 3 mana, which is so good. And then yes, you might have guessed it. It's another Doomsday Excruciator deck. We can get everybody to have 6 cards in their library, and our commander, if you recall, mills people. For 4 mana, you can mill people. So Doomsday Excruciator with our commander is just fun times, but we also have other ways of milling people incidentally that I was running anyway. I was talking about how there's like Power Matters and there's big creatures. Well, Consuming Aberration is one of them. It's just a huge-ass creature, just enormous chonky boy. And then whenever we're casting spells, by the way, we're also milling our opponents a whole ton. And then we have fun cards like Dream Harvest. Dream Harvest, I think, is just a card. If you're in Dimir, you just run it. It's just like Dimir budget Italia, essentially. Everybody exiles a bunch of cards until you get 5 mana value worth of spells from everybody, from each opponent, and you get to cast them for free. It's just so good. So all these cards like incidentally mill, exile our opponents' libraries, and if you have Excruciator out, they're just dead. They're just dead. It's so fun. I love Doomsday Excruciator. It's so fun. So yeah, I love this deck. I think this deck is so cool. I probably am going to build it for myself. I really don't need more decks, but I love this one so much. It's so neat. Is it bracket 2? Is it bracket 3? I want to say it's bracket 2. It's not a very fast deck. I think it's pretty easily disruptible. If you just keep doing graveyard hate against it, I think that's going to be all she wrote usually. But at bracket 2, if you're allowed time to build and stuff and recover, then it's fine. It just really looks really fun. I just want to build it for myself, and then maybe you like it too. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that one. Okay, we come to another personal deck of mine. It's the Indomitable, aka Mono Blue Edric. It's a boat. Now. Boats are allowed to be in the command zone ever since Age of Eternity changed the rules. It's a vehicle, 6/6 Trampler, crew 3. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. And you can also even cast it from your graveyard as long as you control 3 or more tapped pirates and or vehicles. That's not super relevant, but it's nice to have. So this is essentially just my mono blue version of Edric. Edric was one of the first decks I ever built, one of the first budget commanders I ever wrote about in like 2011, I want to say is when I said it. God, I'm old. Anyway, and it is not strictly better than Edric. It is different than Edric. Edric, I think, is actually stronger because it comes out 1 turn earlier. And also, even though it helps your opponents, kind of nice that it helps your opponents because it kind of encourages your opponents to hit each other. And this deck is very bad at blocking. Whereas the Indomitable, it's slower and it gets punched in the face more often, but it doesn't help your opponents. And it's mono blue, which is kind of nice for a mana base because Edric is basically a mono blue deck splashing green, and trying to have the right mana available on the early turns for green while also wanting to be almost always blue is kind of awkward. So I just like the Indomitable for making it easier to build on a budget. But yeah, that's a major difference. I think I like Edric more if you have infinite budget, but I like Indomitable more if you're on a budget. But regardless, no matter what you're building, the Indomitable as either Edric or the boat, the concept is the same. You want to be filling the battlefield with cheap, evasive beaters, hopefully things that also provide utility, but that's not super required. So you have a bunch of 1-drops that have flying, like Flittering Nuisance, Siren Storm Tamer. These things have extra value to them, like the Nuisance draws you cards, the Storm Tamer can protect your board. And we also have some pirates, just because, the Indomitable can potentially be cast from the graveyard with them. And a lot of them are already pirates anyway, so you might as well get more value out of the synergies. Malcolm, for example, it has evasion, so it will draw cards off the Indomitable, but also it will make a bunch of treasures. And then when you have a bunch of creatures on the battlefield, you're playing a bunch of 1-drops or whatever, you're drawing cards off your boat. You're running a bunch of cheap evasion to play the tempo game against your opponent. You're just a tempo deck. So Abjur is hilarious. I see it's getting up in price. I've been talking about this card since like 2011 as like an underrated card, and now it's getting a little bit expensive. But it's a 1-mana blue counterspell, but you have to sacrifice a blue permanent. But who cares if you're sacrificing a 1-mana 1/1, right? So That's really fun. Cipher cards are great here too. All your creatures have evasion, so you just cipher onto one of the creatures and you basically get to untap a land every single turn. And it's basically a blue evasive ramp spell. And rapid hybridization, we just want cheap interaction. Spells that cost 1 to 2 mana maximum, essentially, for the most part. Then in terms of finishers, Nerd Rage, our random 1/1 is now going to be an 11/11 when we're attacking. Wizard class, we're drawing so many cards, we might as well turn that into +1/+1 counters. And Psychosis Crawler, we're turning all that card draw into burn. So this is the list. It's very straightforward. You just play 1-drops. You attack with said 1-drops, you draw cards. You always hold up mana as much as possible for interaction because board wipes are very, very bad for you. It takes a while for you to recover. So you just run as much interaction, counter spells, protection as possible while just constantly drawing cards. And then you eventually close out the game with your just turning card draw into actually a finisher. So I made 2 versions of this deck. This one has no extra turns because I know extra turns are kind of looked down upon in some circles. And also in bracket 2, you're not allowed to chain counter spells. So you could only run like 1, basically, I guess. I think that's what that means. So I made one without any extra turns whatsoever. But I also made a $45 deck that does run counter spells, or not counter spells, extra turn spells. So that will actually be in the article. It's only a couple cards that have changed and it's the same budget. But yeah, so I just replaced a couple cards for some extra turn spell because that's the best thing to do in this style of play. That means you deal another round of damage, but you're also drawing more cards and everything. You're getting extra lane drops on the battlefield and stuff, as weird as it is to say. And yeah, so that's probably the best way of actually upgrading the list, but it will bump it up in bracket, I guess. I think this is a bracket 2. It's not like super fast. And like I said, a board wipe really slows down this deck if you don't have a counter spell ready for it. But when it is rolling, it is very oppressive because like once you have like 3 or so counter spells in your hand and you have all the cheap interaction in your hands and you have a board of like little beaters drawing you 3 or more cards each turn, there's not a lot for your opponents to stop you with, honestly, other than punching you in the face. I guess punching you in the face works, but it is relatively oppressive once it is in the driving seat just because you're in blue and you can hold up your mana for everything. The next deck is the Wandering Minstrel. This is a 5-color Lanes Matter deck, and it uses mostly the fact that Wandering Minstrel is a 2-drop that makes all your lands enter untapped. So you can have a janky mana base, 5-color mana base full of tap lands, and all of a sudden they're going to look like super high-end Abuduls with the Wandering Minstrel. He also has other abilities. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 5 or more towns, you get a 2/2 elemental creature that's all colors. That's actually very relevant. And he even doubles as a win condition in your deck. You can pay an obscene amount of mana, 3 and Wooburg. The Wooburg means he's 5-color. So you have 8 mana total. Other creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of towns you control. So he turns all your mana into basically fast mana, and he poops out elementals, and he acts as a finisher for the deck. Yeah, your boy is really strong. He's one of the strongest lanes mattering commanders you can have on a budget. That is for sure. So what is the deck doing? The deck is doing 2 things. It's all towns because the payoff for towns is really good, and the downside is nothing. All these towns are basically 2 colors. They tap for 2 colors to enter tapped, but with the Wandering Minstrel out, they all enter untapped. So yay. And then if you have enough towns, you make elementals and you can start pumping up your team. So towns are just amazing with the Wandering Minstrel. The other thing that's amazing with the Wandering Minstrel are bounce lands. So we're running all the bounce lands too. They enter the battlefield untapped with the Wandering Minstrel. They immediately tap for 2 mana and you return a land you control to your hand. Who cares? So they're essentially ramp in this deck, and we're putting all these together because we're running 10 bounce lands. We're also running a bunch of ways of putting additional lands onto the battlefield so we can do even more nasty, rampy stuff all over the place. And Pupuyu for has never looked ever better than over here because finally its activated ability for 3 mana is actually relevant. Who would have guessed? Yeah, that is very sick. This deck is also an elemental deck because The Wandering Minstrel makes elementals, and elementals are basically landfall adjacent anyway. So even without the elementals from our commander, it just makes sense. So we have On-Math Locus of Creation. It's making mana for us. It's gaining us life. It's dealing damage. Risen Reef is making more landfall things, drawing us cards. On-Math is making a huge army that will eventually kill everybody's faces with burn. What else do we have? Oh, we have combos. Infinite combos, of course. Any of the things that put lands onto the battlefield by tapping them with a bounce land and Retreat to Korra means that we can play the scout, tap it, put in a land, like a bounce land. It will trigger Retreat to Korra. We'll bounce the land back to our hand, the bounce land back to our hand. We'll use Retreat to untap the creature. The creature will then tap again to put the bounce land back in, and you do that infinite times for infinite landfall. And then something like Sabotender, that's infinite damage. Boohoo, you win the game. So yeah, this deck is actually very good. Yeah, I don't know if it's bracket 2 or bracket 3. I would say maybe it's bracket 3. It's not super fast. Well, it is actually super fast. If the Wandering Minstrel is allowed to live, then the deck is actually super fast, which is a little bit scary. And it's a 2-drop, so you can recast it a bunch of times. But it is small. So you can kill the Wandering Minstrel a lot of times. And if the Wandering Minstrel is not allowed to stick around, then the deck slows down a whole bunch. But if it is, then the deck is going to combo off and kill people pretty fast. So I don't know, man. It might be bracket 3. Who knows? Let me know in the comment section, I guess. Next, we get to the one deck that bothered me the most while doing this video. Toph, the First Metal Bender. Toph is one of my favorite brews from this video. I love it so much. And also, I feel like I came up with a much different brew than a lot of the ones I saw online, like the ones I saw on Reddit and EDH Rec. I was like, this is not at all what I was doing. I think mine is much better. Sorry. But yeah, I built this deck, I think in like November, and I got it under the budget, and it took a long time. And then every couple of weeks, it spiked in price, and I had to make changes to it that I did not enjoy. And literally yesterday, when I was getting ready to record this video again, it went over the budget, and I had to cut a card I really didn't want to cut. It was Liquimetal Torque, and I don't know, this deck annoyed me, and I'm so excited to never have to deal with this stupid deck list again because I love it so much, and I didn't want to cut it from the video. But anyway, Toph, the First Metal Bender, it's a Naya deck that is all about making your non-token artifacts lands in addition to the other types. They don't tap for mana or anything, but they become lands. And at the beginning of your end step, you Earth Bend 2. This is such a cool ability. It has so much potential, and I feel like all of EDH Rec and so many Reddit subreddits have squandered it and made it just like a basic vanilla landfall deck. And it's not that. It's such a waste. Why are you building it like that? My version is better. Let me show you the way. So the heart of this deck is actually little artifacts that cantrip or do something nice for you. Chromatic Star, Experimental Synthesizer, Ichor Wellspring. These are 1 to 2 mana artifacts that basically cantrip, and they want to be sacrificed for value. Why do we say that? Because we're pairing them with a bunch of hero effects. Dire Strain Rampage. This is a card that I actually don't think anybody runs, and I misread a billion times. It's basically a rampant growth for yourself. You can destroy your own land and ramp out 2 basic lane cards, by the way. But it could also double up as removal for your opponent's stuff. But the point is, this plus like Larval Scoutlander, which is an artifact that is a hero on a stick. Evendo Brush Razor. These are all like, we sacrifice our lands for value, for various values. Dire Strain Rampage, Larval Scoutlander, you sacrifice a land and you get 2 lands in return. Evendo Bush Raider, you sacrifice a land, you make some mana, and oh, by the way, you're also impulse drawing. So we sacrifice these artifacts that want to be sacrificed for value anyway. They're 1 to 2 drops. We sacrifice them for value. We're drawing cards. while we're ramping with these cards. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And why doesn't EDH Rec show me these cards? I don't know. Anyway, then the other aspect of it is they're also artifacts. We're an artifact deck. These cards are still artifacts, even though they're lanes too. So we have a bunch of ways of sacrificing artifacts for value as well. So like Memorial of Art, we sacrifice artifacts, we impulse draw. Radiant Lotus, we sacrifice a whole bunch of artifacts, we make a whole bunch of mana. Finally, we get to use Radiant Lotus. Slowback Goblin Tinker, we sacrifice an artifact, we can protect another artifact. Love to see it. Then we also have other cute things. These ones I see in like other brews, but like, yeah, there's more options available here. Anyway, Boom Pile is great because all of our artifacts are lanes now, right? So when we win the flip, we destroy all non-lane permanents. That means our artifacts are fine, which also means the Boom Pile is fine, by the way. We blow up everything but our artifacts, basically, and our lands. So Boom Pile lives, our artifacts live, but our opponent's stuff are basically all gone. Phoenix Down is hilarious because if you Earthbend it, then you can use it to, either, I guess, exile a skeleton, spirit, or zombie. Unlikely. But we can return our commander from the graveyard or something instead. And the Stasis Coffin is also hilarious. You Earthbend it, you can exile it whenever you want to gain protection from everything until your next turn. And because it got Earthbent, even though it gets exiled, it will come right back and we could use it again later on. That's super fun. And then the MVP of the decks is definitely Toph, Hard-Headed Hit Teacher. When all our artifacts are lanes, that means we can Earthbend them all. And when we Earthbend them all with Toph, then they come back when they're getting sacrificed, and we can sacrifice them more often. And Toph is basically the best part of the deck in the 99. And Great Divide Guide is another one that's amazing in the deck because it gives the mana ability to all our artifacts that are lands, because they don't have the tap for mana ability until we give it one with like Great Divide Guide. And these two cards are so good that I threw in Tail of Momo because it can get back, it can get Toph, it can get Great Divide Guide, but it can also get back our commander if it dies, and we can circumvent the mana, the commander attacks on that too. Boy, am I getting tired. But anyway, this deck is super fun. And it keeps going up in price. And I just look at it right now. No, say it and so. Oh my God, it's $46. You know what? We're just going to have to live with it. You and I, we have gotten 3 hours into this video, and we have to just live with the fact that it's now a $46 deck, and it was $45 yesterday, and I've price adjusted this so many times in the past couple months. I also took out Liquimetal Torque, and it was like my favorite card in this deck. It was like $1 when I put it in, or $2, and now it's like $4 something, and I was like, you know what? I can't have it anymore, and it sucks. Everything sucks. Put that in this deck. If you can find it, if you have it somewhere in a bulk pile, put in Liquimetal Torque, please. Because making your commander into an artifact is really cool, because then you can Earthbend your commander, and that's a great way for it to survive. I put in like Ashnod's Token or something, Ashnod's Transmogrant instead of it, and it's not the same. I'm sad. Anyway, we'll move on. The video's got to end. Okay, here's the last one. Last one of the video. Wan Shi Tong, All Knowing. This one was another request. This was from 3-3 Elk. The Elk wanted me to build a Wan Shi Tong deck, and so I have provided it. Wan Shi Tong. It's a 5-mana big ol' bird spirit, 4/4. And when it enters, target non-land permanent's owner puts it into their library, second from the top or on the bottom. And whenever one or more cards are put into the library from anywhere, create 2/1/1 colorless spirit creature tokens with this token can't block or be blocked by non-spirit creatures. So Wan Shi Tong cares about cards going into the library. And it also has a powerful ETB. It deals with any non-land permanent. Any non-land permanent is going to get put back into the library. And by the way, when we're doing that, we're making up these spirits that are basically 1/1s with straight up evasion, just like straight up cannot be blocked, essentially. So he's making a bunch of tokens that are great attackers that will win us the game eventually. And it also has a really powerful ETB that is just like removal for basically anything. And that's very, very powerful to have in the command zone in a mono blue deck. So what are we doing with that? So the first thing we're doing with that, we're blinking it. That ETB is so powerful, so we're going to get extra value out of it. Essence Flux is really good. Voidwalk is a card I haven't put in a commander deck in like maybe a decade, but it's so perfect here. You cipher it onto one of your 1/1 tokens that have basically perfect evasion, and you smack an opponent with your evasive 1/1, and you just blink Wan Shitong every single time, and every single time he comes back, you get to put away another permanent that is a problem for you. Baboon Spear 2, it can blink Wan Shitong, but it also just poops out a bunch of more 1/1s with evasion. Love to see it. And then we're also doing something very fun. We're doing Tunnel Vision. We've splurged for Tunnel Vision. If somebody makes the horrible mistake of bottoming a card with Wan Shitong, we can name the card with Tunnel Vision, and then our opponents basically mill everything until they get to that bottom card and they deck themselves and they die. The other way we could do it is we use Hinder and Spell Crumple. Again, these trigger Wan Shitong. We can bottom the card and then Tunnel Vision them and kill them. This is actually something that happened fairly regularly in Commander way back in the day, way when the Tuck rule was different, when you could actually put commanders into the library and they couldn't just be put back into the command zone instead. Before, you had to put them into the library. So Tunnel Vision was a funny way with Hinder and Spell Crumple to just kill people. And Spell Crumple and Hinder were like the best ways of getting rid of commanders, or one of the best ways, way back in the day. That's a lore tidbit from 2011 Commander. Boy. And then, yeah, other things we're doing other than blinking and hindering and whatnot. Brainstorm triggers Wan Shitong very easily. Sebion triggers Wan Shitong very easily. And then if we don't have Wan Shitong, or we have Wan Shitong and we want to have more value, Tolarian Contempt is very funny. I never put it in a deck before, but it's perfect in a Wan Shitong deck because it bounces opponent's creatures, but then also makes more spirits. So yeah, the deck is super fun. It's a control-y style deck. Its main weakness is that Wan Shitong's 5 mana. So if you can't protect the commander very well, if the commander dies a bunch of times, you're going to be in the struggle bus situation. But the upside with Wan Shitong is that we have so many good blink spells that actually killing Wan Shitong is relatively difficult just because we can always blink it in response. And we are running like counter spells and stuff as further ways of protecting it. So we're trying to make it as difficult as possible, and we're trying to run as much ramp as possible. But that is the flaw of the deck, is that we're in mono blue. We don't have the best options to ramp, obviously. And if our opponent kills our commander too many times, then the deck is going to struggle a little bit. Is it bracket 3? Is it bracket 2? I want to say it's bracket 2. But it has some spice to it, and it is very controlling. So maybe bracket 3 is more appropriate. I don't know. You tell me. And with that, my friends, we finally get to the end. I've been recording for over 3 hours. I don't know how long the end video will be, but I am sure as heck tired. It is 1 o'clock in the morning here, and I think I'm going to end here. I hope you enjoyed these. They take a very, very long time for me to make. Way too long. Literally took me months to complete this thing, and it took days to just price adjust because I was a fool and I didn't power it out in a single week like I should have. I did it over months slowly, and that was wrong. Hopefully the prices don't go up too much by the time I publish this video, which will be the next day. Hopefully they don't go up too much overnight. I will be very upset. And hopefully they're not too expensive by the time you're watching this in the future. As I always say with these compilation videos, though, the best way to assemble these decks is by finding either a friend or yourself. If you have just piles and piles of magic cards laying around, there's just bulk that you have just sorted, hopefully sorted into colors or something. That's the easiest way of building these decks because all these cards are bulk, essentially. The vast majority of them, at least, are bulk. So you're going to find them very easily. You don't have to buy all these cards, hopefully not. Hopefully it's not the basics. Anyway, that's all for now. I'm getting rambly. I'm getting tired. I hope this has helped everybody. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. And until next time, friends. See ya.